Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2. Hey, Brian.
Testing, 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 testing. Thank you. Are those guys still? Testing, test.
I don't have a gavel, so I'm going to bang my shoe on the desk. Good morning. I wasn't going to cut. Lewis's hair looks good. I was just going to let it, you know. I like the blade. And then I'm like, I gave up. No, but it looks good. I was, you know, I like that. But... it's up to you. I mean, we're, you know. I don't think we should. I just put him on the overhead. No, if you don't want to, you don't want to. Yeah. I mean, I'm, you know. Yeah. All right.
Eric, are we live?
We may switch it up. I mean, I knew they weren't going to be here, so. But John's virtual. All right.
Eric?
He can vote by camera as long as there's 4 people here.
Are we broadcasting? Or is the webinar live? Eric, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, let me
Okay.
know when you're all ready, and we'll get this
Okay.
show on the road. Can we begin?
I'm not up.
Okay.
It's up here. It'll eventually.
All right. Just
They
let,
say they can hear me. We call roll.
Tim, you out there?
are we good? All right. All right. We're good to go.
Okay, Chair, I'll start the broadcast.
All right, go ahead.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
I'd like to go ahead and call this Tampa City Council meeting to order. Before I begin, welcome home. We haven't been here since last spring. I know it's a completely different setup, but here we are, back in the safest way that we could do. Mr. Shelby, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members of City Council. Martin Shelby, the City Council Attorney. As Chairman Maniscalco said, we are here at Old City Hall. Today is Thursday, January 28th, 2021, and this meeting, to remind the members of the public, this workshop is taking place during a declared state of emergency. It's being conducted with a live, in-person quorum of the City Council present in the City Council chambers. However, excuse me, Eric, are you able to hear me? No. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Well, we'll get this going and see how this works. In response to the COVID-19 restrictions, members of the public are encouraged to participate virtually through teleconferencing, referred to by Florida statutes and rules as Communications Media Technology, or CMT. And these meetings are held in accordance with the emergency rules of procedure as adopted by resolution number 220-225, as amended by resolution number 220-490, and as may be amended by City Council. The public and the citizens of the City of Tampa are able to watch this meeting and view it on cable TV, Spectrum Channel 640, Frontier Channel 15, and on the internet as viewed at tampa.gov/live stream. And I'm trying to talk directly into this microphone. Somebody is, I believe, hearing this garbled, so I just want to bring that to the tech people's attention. Members of the public are able to virtually participate in this meeting, and it all is available for the public to learn about it at the tampa.gov/city council, one word, website, tampa.gov/city council. I should point out that those who wish to participate at City Hall will do so using CMT. In other words, they will use virtual technology, which is located on the second floor. Those individuals who do not have access to a communications media device and do not register in advance, have the option of coming to City Hall during the hybrid live virtual meeting and participating using CMT. Please note that the use of masks and social distancing inside the building are required. All written material that have been received for today's workshop have been distributed to City Council, and I have nothing further, Mr. Chairman. I turn the meeting back to you and City Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Roll call, please.
Miranda. Dingfelder. Vieira.
Here.
Citro.
Here.
Goods. Here. Carlson.
Here.
Maniscalco.
Here? All righty. We go to the invocation. Councilmember Carlson, if you would like to introduce your guest today.
Yes, thank you, sir. I'd like to introduce Rabbi Joel Simon. Are you on? He's being patched in.
Well, thank you, Councilman Carlson, for inviting me to join you this morning.
Let me introduce you real fast. Sorry, I want to make sure you're on there. Rabbi Joel Simon began his rabbinic career at Congregation Shaare Zedek in 2007 as the assistant rabbi under Rabbi Richard Bernholtz. And after a brief hiatus outside Philadelphia, he returned to become senior rabbi of the 1200 family congregation in 2018 upon Rabbi Bernholtz's retirement. Rabbi Simon is the chair of the Tampa Rabbinical Association and sits on the board of the Judeo-Christian Health Clinic. He and his wife live in Carrollwood with their 2 children, now 5 and 3.5. Thank you, sir. Please lead our invocation.
All right, please stand and remain standing for the pledge afterwards.
Well, thank you, Councilman Carlson, for inviting me to join you this morning. I don't know if it's why you invited me, but today is actually the minor Jewish holiday Tu B'Shvat. Originally a tax day, it has become the Jewish Arbor Day, a day to celebrate trees and nature. Most rabbis' favorite story to tell on Tu B'Shvat is that of Honi, a rabbi 2,000 years ago who the Talmud tells us was walking down the road one day when he saw an old man planting a carob tree. Honi said to the man, "How many years will this tree need to produce fruit?" And the man answered, 70 years. Honi said, "Do you really think that you will be alive in 70 years? And the man answered, "When I was born, I found carob trees already in the world, planted by my ancestors. Just as my grandparents planted for me, I plant now for the next generation." This story reminds us that our actions not only have an impact on our present time or our immediate company. Each of our actions plants a seed that grows and branches outward, weaving through countless lives and many generations, creating our ultimate legacy. I know that everyone present here this morning is here because you care about the legacy that you leave behind. Yesterday was International Holocaust Remembrance Day. And as I joined in conversation with Councilman Vieira last night on Facebook, I was thinking about the tree that my grandparents, refugees from Nazi Europe, planted for my children. I thought about the conversation my congregation had with Councilman Goods 2 weeks ago as we prepared for Martin Luther King Day, and conversations we've shared together with Councilman Dienfelder, and remembering the trees that were planted by those of all colors who worked together with Dr. King, fighting for equal rights for all. While my grandparents did not live long enough to meet their namesakes, their courage, perseverance, and patience showed that we can create light from darkness. And they created a world for my father that was better than theirs had been, as my parents were able to do for me. Our God and God of our ancestors, I pray that you be with the members of this council, the great city it represents, and all those who protect it. As we move closer to emerging, we pray, from this difficult chapter of history. Grant us that same courage, perseverance, and patience as that of my grandparents and so many of their generation who taught us how to move forward from one of the darkest periods in history by becoming better than we had before. May our legacy be one of prudence. May our legacy be one of compassion. May our legacy be one of love for all of our neighbors and of love for the stranger. And may the fruits of that tree provide nourishment for generations to come. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Okay, we've already done roll call. Yes, sir.
I just want to make sure that this council and the citizens of Tampa will give a special prayer for our most senior councilman, Mr. Charlie Miranda, during this time. I think it's appropriate that we acknowledge him and make sure that he has our blessings and he knows that we're with him. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. I second that, and I appreciate those words. Councilman Miranda is certainly in our prayers for a speedy recovery. We know that he will beat this, and we look forward to his return here with us. Thank you very much. And also a belated happy birthday to Councilmember Luis Vieira, 29 years old. Yep. All right, a little bit of housekeeping. Item number 1, there was a memo from the office of Councilmember Goods that we removed this item. Is that correct, sir? May I have a motion to remove item number 1? All right, we have a motion from Councilman Goods, second from Councilman Vieira. All in favor? Aye. All right. That leads, yes, sir? Okay, thank you very much, sir. And also, we have a change of order in the agenda with items 5 through 8. I believe there's a copy being handed out. Just real quick, item number 7 is going to be number 5, 8 will be 6, 6 will be 7, and 5 will be 8. So just flipping those items around, but the agenda will continue hopefully smoothly. I hope that we get out of here by lunchtime so we don't have to take a break and come back, because we do have to come back at 5 for our evening session. Last week we got out at almost 2 a.m., so you know how that goes. Having said that, let's go to public comment. I know we have a few people downstairs. If you're here to speak for public comment, please go to the kiosk that should be to your left. If you're facing the TV screens and speak there, we'll be able to see you. All right, if we can switch to the public comment camera. There we go. I see Mr. Ransom, 2 other gentlemen. Go ahead, please state your name for the record.
We can't really hear you here, but my name is James Ransom. I'm representing the Tampa Organization of Black Affairs. And Mr. Chair, rather than be redundant and repetitive, we're respectfully requesting some additional time for us to make our comments.
All right, they have 3 people with them. We generally allow 3 minutes a person, so we can do at least 9 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much.
Can we turn the volume up in the room?
Good morning, Council. My name is Ralph Smith. I'm a member of the Saturday Morning Breakfast Group.
We should wait because we can't hear you at all.
Yeah, wait. We can't.
Let me start with, how you doing? My name is Ralph Smith. Good morning, Council. I'm a member of this.
Wait. Can we raise the volume, turn it up here in the council chambers?
Testing 1, 2, 3. How's that?
There's no volume going up here. Just a fan and the lights.
Can you guys still hear me?
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Wait.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Now we have an echo.
Mr. Shelby, did you check to see if they can turn the volume up in here?
They are working on it. And I've been told, hopefully this is coming through clearly now, because I've been told that I was not intelligible or easily understood when I made my initial comments for some of the viewing audience. So I just want to see if it's working now. And I will double check, Mr. Chairman. We'll get things in order as quickly as we can.
How are we doing? Is that any better?
It's a little bit better.
Okay.
Yeah, 'cause we did a test run the other day, and I went down there, and they could hear it clearly here. And so.
Yeah. The others are remote.
Chairman, this is John Bennett over in a remote site, and we hear the public comment extremely well on our end.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, Mr. Smith, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, City Council, and thank you for taking the time to listen to public comment. My name is Ralph Smith. I'm a resident of the City of Tampa. I'm also a member of the Saturday Morning Breakfast Group, and I'm a member of the BOAC committee. A couple of years ago, we looked at changing the BOAC ordinance to include additional points on RFPs for minority participants. Currently, BOAC is doing a good job of encouraging WIMBYs to certify, but certification is just not enough. Certification does not lead to contracts. In fact, the last figures that we received in the committee and through the public was in about 2015 showed that African American businesses were only receiving 2% of the contracts, of the amount of the contracts that are being awarded by the City of Tampa. I think the BOAC committee needs to be much more effective, would be much more effective if it concentrated more on working on the number of contracts and the amounts of contracts to minorities rather than just certification. Thank you.
Good morning, Council. Thank you very much for the additional time to speak. And my name is Bryce Bowden. I'm a member of the Saturday Morning Breakfast Group. Actually, I'm the secretary. And my comments are going to be relatively short, and basically, and they're going to be pretty much rhetorical. And history has shown that rhetorical statements have been very good motivators and persuaders of people to take action. And I think that these are some things that need to be taken a look at and action taken. And I know the workshop is all about the ordinance 26.5, and one of the issues that I have looked at was the good faith efforts. And part of it states that good faith efforts are a court-mandated requirement. Then it also says in this thing that prior to any contract being awarded, well, I'll read it exactly. It says the determination of whether a bidder has made good faith effort will be made by the manager prior to the award of the project in compliance with the terms hereof. The question that I have, or my statement is that, where's the data showing that that good faith effort had been documented? What is the audit trail? What is the inspection? Those type of things. So those are the questions when we start talking about this ordinance. As this commercial goes, where's the beef? So that's the overall thing that my question in regards to this. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you.
Good morning, Council. My name is James Ransom. I'm a board member and chair of the Economic Development Committee for the Tampa Organization of Black Affairs. We spoke with all of you that we could get to yesterday about the issue that we came to speak about, the EBO issue. We know staff's going to report on some findings or give you an update on what the consultants, HNTB and Aerial Business Group, did for you all and for them. We did meet with HNTB last week, had a conversation. Nothing in our conversation led to any recommendations. We haven't seen any recommendations in the report we saw 2 nights ago to make any changes. We already emailed you what my comments are going to be about. So we're technically here to just reaffirm our request for action from the mayor and the administration. We think the spirit is there. We think the mayor has the vision and intention to do the right thing. And we know the city council has taken the leadership action that we like to see, probably the unprecedented leadership action. We've never seen a city council stop contracts from the mayor to get the attention of the administration in the history of Tampa. So this is good leadership on both sides, the efforts there. What we don't want is delayed action when we have enough detail. We don't want delayed action when we have the mayor who has executive authority to have her administration adhere to maybe new policies and procedures and practices and possibly performance management agreements that are goal-oriented, measurable, accountable, transparent, and consequential for failing to comply with what the city says it wants to do. And so what does the city want to do? The city wants to improve and increase its spending with black-owned businesses. Not just black-owned businesses, but that's why we're here. So in addition to others being paid, we want the city to intentionally spend more money with black-owned businesses. And there is an easy way to do that. We've provided information to the city about Atlanta, Georgia, Charlotte, North Carolina, Greenville, South Carolina, Cincinnati, Ohio, Miami, Florida, where much of what you need to write into an ordinance or your administrative directives has been done by cities where good practices are already being done. So we would appreciate you continuing to not approve contracts until this is resolved. And I know you're working with the city, but while you're spending money waiting for maybe a disparity study in a couple of years, you're still spending money with other people than black-owned companies. So we definitely don't want you doing that. We don't want you to deny us, taxpayers who vote in Hillsborough County, in the city of Tampa, from the same prosperity being shared by others. But thank you for your time. And we're going to continue to collaborate with the staff who's working with us as well and with you to help to make this happen, okay?
Thank you very much.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you. All right, next speaker.
Sorry.
That's okay, no. You gotta.
Go ahead, sir. Please state your name for the record.
Okay. My name is Victor DeMaio. I'm here representing Coyote Ugly in Ybor City. I'm here because we received a letter from the city attorney's office, a rather ominous letter saying that we have to, from now on, provide 2 officers 7 days a week. But the main reason I'm here is because if you look at the very last line on this page, it says this requirement applies to establishments with a 250+ person occupancy load. The situation we have is that because of COVID, our legal occupancy load has been reduced to 150. So technically, and I've spoken to a couple of attorneys about this, we don't really come under this particular requirement. The other situation is this. We've had officers in the past. This was an issue a few years ago. We put a deposit down, which is still there. But the reality is that we've requested officers. They show up initially, and then a couple of weeks later, we're down to 1 officer, and a couple of weeks after that, we're down to no officers. Because there's just not that many officers, especially now with Super Bowl going on. There's just not that many officers. We've actually called the sheriff's office. They're not assigning off-duty officers because of the COVID situation. I guess I can go to Plant City or Temple Terrace. I don't know which. So I've called, honestly, in this particular letter on the second page, it says here to call Captain Brent Owen. I've called Captain Owen, and some lady named Anna Richardson Griffin called. And I called initially on Monday when this first thing came up. And I've called Monday, I've called today. Captain Owen doesn't call me back. When I called the city attorney's office, they told me Susan Johnson-Velez was the lady in charge of this particular situation to get clarification. I called Susan Johnson-Velez Monday, I called her yesterday, and I'm still waiting for a return call. So I'm here because, I just don't know what else to do. And I'm trying to help my client, along with these other, 14 establishments that are in the same situation. But because of COVID, we have legally been reduced to 150 people. We have tables and chairs. There's no standing around. There's nothing against the officers, but the officers don't even go inside the establishment. They just stand outside and just, we don't mind paying for officers, but I do have an issue with paying officers just to provide extra security in Ybor City. Somebody please tell me what myself or what Coyote Ugly is supposed to do.
Councilman Goods.
Mr. Chairman, I had gotten with legal about that issue. I know that is an issue with the bars having security officers down in Ybor City. I do remember when I was on the force that officers were required down there. But again, I asked legal again, the question would be, a lot of officers don't want to work off duty anymore, and Super Bowl and a lot of the COVID, how will we be able to supply those officers to those businesses? And the city attorney officer, they are working on a plan to make sure we can provide officers. So hopefully we'll have something in writing on how they'll be able to do that, to be able to give the security that's needed down in Ybor. And what and since Mr. Mayo is talking about their officers' assignment, what the description, what the officers are allowed to do and not. But I do know officers are not allowed to just patrol inside of bars. And I know the sheriff office, unless they've changed their policy, don't allow deputies to work alcohol establishments. So I think we just need to get a little clear understanding, something out a little more definitive to the business owners of how this will work and how this will be mustered along. And I yield back, sir.
Thank you very much. And Mr. DeMaio, I'll coordinate with you and my office and see if we can get you some answers with our legal department and whatnot. And we have your contact information. We'll reach out to you and see how we can help with the communication here.
I appreciate it. And my concern, again, is starting this weekend and going forward, are we going to be, is code enforcement going to show up and start sending us tickets? Because according to this letter, you get 4 tickets and they pull your liquor license. And, we've already lost hundreds of thousands of dollars.
All right. We have someone that's on the line to speak. Is that one of our attorneys?
Yes, this is Gina Grimes, city attorney.
Okay.
I'm the person that drafted the courtesy notice of enforcement that Mr. DeMaio is referring to. And he was informed that if he has problems or issues with respect to the notice and its applicability to his client Coyote Ugly, that he could talk directly to me. He has not reached out to me. He reached out, and I just found out this morning he reached out to Susan Johnson-Velez yesterday. But I'm happy to work with Mr. DeMaio to see how we can resolve this issue. And as to Mr. Good's issue, I can assure you that any of these establishments in Ybor City that are required to have the extra duty officers, there will be sufficient officers available to serve in those spots.
Okay, that was Gina Grimes, our city attorney, Mr. DeMaio. She's happy to discuss this with you. So if you reach out to her, if not, again, we'll be happy to get you the phone number and or set it up. All right?
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Next speaker. Yes, sir.
Montesna, Tampa, Florida. Hold on one second, please. Can you hold my time, please?
Yes, sir.
Can you guys hold it down? Appreciate it. A whole lot.
Go ahead, sir.
Montesna, Tampa, Florida. We have a reality here, which is we had 3 gentlemen that just came up and spoke, and they from the Breakfast Club, and they spoke in reference to
just the disproportional, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, just disproportional allocation of city contracts, and that's something I've been speaking on for 30 years. We're 26% of this population, and we don't get 26% of the good services or just anything that's allocated throughout the city for African people. We're 26% of the population. We don't get 26% of nothing good in this city. Now, anything bad, if it's arrests, if it's evictions, if it's anything bad, if it's going to Florida State Penitentiary, we get about 80% of that. Okay? It's time for that to change. And the reality is, I always said it, I said it today, I said it 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, what we have is a do-nothing city council. The city council, the city is an automatic. As a matter of fact, the mayor don't even come down here anymore. And there's a reason for that. Because apparently the power is somewhere else and the government is not doing anything for the people other than run around and try to get a vote. Now for African people, for black people, y'all like to see us beg some more, dance, and then suffer. And at the end of the day, we come up here and you give us some kind of award and say, hey, this person, this and that, but ain't nothing changed. And it's time for us to have some changes in this city. It's time for us to have some changes in this city, not window dressing. It's some things we want to see in this city so black people can move forward. And we can forget about, because what they're doing is they're using Jim Crow and black codes to do the same thing they've been doing for hundreds of years. And it's time for that to change. Some of the things we would like to see is we'd like to see this city council step up to stop all the suspension of the driver's license for people in child support, people who have these outstanding fines that they put on down, add-on fines they put on down, the tickets and other things, and other reasons. We would also like to see the fact that this city council today, right now today, make a statement towards what's been going on up before this city council. You know one thing about me? Can you hold 1 second, please?
Go ahead.
You have to excuse me 1 second. There's somebody talking in the other room. When they finish talking, I'll be able to speak. There's something about me, irrespective of what you think. When I hear people saying and doing derogatory things, making racial jokes, making religious jokes, making ethnic jokes, I walk away from it. And
we can't hear if anyone's talking in the other room. If anyone is speaking in the other room on the second floor, please, if you allow the gentleman to finish.
Hey, I would speak last if necessary to have the ability to speak in peace. Because if grown folks can't come to a place and be quiet when it's other people trying to speak, there's a serious problem with that. Now, if they protesting or demonstrating, I don't have a problem with that. But if a person's trying to speak and they know they're right there in the other room and they talking and continue to talk, I'm in the other room, I can't even hear what's going on over here when the other person was speaking or when the other people were speaking. That's disrespect to the highest level. You want to speak, go outside. So, as I was saying, when people are making ethnic, racial, religious jokes, I separate myself from that. And anyone have enough sense to know, and I'm sure our city council representatives have enough sense to know about sensitivity, about racial sensitivity, about religious sensitivity, about gender sensitivity. You can't do that no more. And we've had here before this last year ended, we've had 2 people came right to this microphone and insulted the existence of African people, and the whole city council sat there and didn't put them in check. As a matter of fact, they gave one person an award. A person came right before this microphone and spoke about the poverty mentality in the people of East Tampa. It's an insult. And we need an apology from this city council. Yet another man come before this microphone, and it's all good, freedom of speech. It's all good. But when you insult him, something need to be said about that.
Thank you.
We had another man come and speak of African people being thugs and drug dealers and don't pay taxes. City Council have to rebuke those statements.
Thank you very much, sir. Do we have anybody else in the public to speak here at the lectern? Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Good morning, Connie Burton. I want to really appreciate the rabbi in his invocation this morning, because it kind of guided my thoughts as we move toward 2021. What type of seeds are we planting? We've seen so much go on. People are having to have real examples of what disparities look like, not just on a local level, but seeing it from the national level, of seeing how people have been able to storm capitals, the national capital, talk about insurrection and limited reaction other than talking points. Right here in East Tampa, when we're talking about economic opportunities, and hopefully your workshop should include you walking through East Tampa, not prior to an election, but come to East Tampa and see why we don't have African Americans that is skilled, that is able-bodied, able to participate in economic opportunity with this city. Why is it every time that we are having this workshop and we say what percentage of contracts are coming to the African community, it always starts from a 0.00 point percentage, and it has been allowed to be given to you all by African American presenters as if it's okay. It is not okay. We want to plant seeds of hope for our community. We call on this entire Democrats that has utilized the black votes for your very position to change your course immediately. That we say in East Tampa that we cannot talk about removal of blight and slum and poverty if the very people in that community cannot participate economically. We're going to keep on and keep on with the same title, with the same message, because yes, I brought my grandson here. I've taken him all through this city because I want him to see what Tampa looked like. I want him to understand it's not because we are lazy, but because policies are being driven to make sure that if he don't fight and if I don't fight, then our community will not change and our young people will not have any hope. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Do we have anybody else for public comment that wishes to speak at this time? Yes, ma'am, go ahead. You have 3 minutes. If you could state your name.
Good morning. My name's Natasha Goodley. I have a business consulting firm here in Tampa, and I've worked with well over 300 small and micro businesses within the Tampa Bay area, and I've helped hundreds of businesses access capital through COVID relief efforts. Based on my work, I can advise of many problems the businesses encounter, as well as some of the obstacles I've noticed and noted over the years. The first is the woman-owned business designation for Black women and minority-owned businesses. Currently, it's not a designation that female minority-owned businesses receive, and it should be, because that's, if we want to call them strikes, it's 2 strikes. Being a Black female is also another strike, being a female and then being Black. And so you should have the two designations being provided to the business. Second, we need to expand the Bridges to Business program to not just help businesses get started with the certification process, but to actually be with them to complete the process and then actually help them obtain contracts. Third, of course, we could always use a more user-friendly website. Fourth, provide help with the structure, foundation, and organization of businesses. And I do understand that we have several, the SBA, the SBDC, we have several organizations that work to do that, but I think we need to have a more cohesive grouping with the city to also assist those businesses with it. All RFPs are not written the same. Some are very difficult to understand what it is that the city is actually seeking. So we need to do more to access participation across the board. The same businesses consistently get business with the city of Tampa because many others are shut out of the process because it's very, even for myself, and for those who know me, I have a doctorate degree, and sometimes it's very difficult to actually figure out what it is that the RFP is actually requesting. So I'm consistently approached in my personal business by larger white-owned businesses who want to partner for the only reason of taking advantage of working with minority contractors. Typically, my skill set isn't even taken into consideration. We might want to consider also scrutinizing the actual role that minorities play in subcontractor roles on these contracts so we can end some of the trickery. Unfortunately, you know, small businesses need business, so many are not going to turn down an effort to work with a larger company, but they're only on the contract so that they can get the minority designation. They're not there for any competency. It's just for the designation. And then lastly, we need more support for Black-owned businesses. It was very recent that the city of Tampa acknowledged the disenfranchisement of Black Americans in the city. That was the first step. And so the second step needs to be in implementing policies to correct the wrong. And I think one of those policies can be really working with Black-owned businesses to help them get more of a footing in the city so that we can see an increase in Black-owned businesses with contracts. Thank you.
Did you say you had a PhD?
JD.
Okay, so you're all right.
Yes.
I didn't know that. Good,
Yes,
very
Stetson
good.
University College of Law, class of 2005.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you. All right, if we have anybody else for public comment? If anybody else wishes to speak there in the audience, please come down to the lectern. There we go.
Is this, yeah, there it is. Can City Council see, this is Joe Robbins, can City Council see what's on the Elmo before I start?
Yes, sir. If you could speak into the microphone so we can hear you more clearly.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
I'm over talk everybody talking, I ain't worried about that.
We can see what's on the overhead.
All right.
Go ahead.
Joe Robinson here to speak about, since there's no comments at the workshop, let me just say this. I reviewed the HNTB aerial report, and here's a little thing about it. Since I don't have time in the workshop to talk about it, let City Council ask me a question. I'll hang around if you want to ask me a question. First of all, it's 67 pages. That is a good 30,000-foot level looking down start. It needs to be at the transparent clear view in a direction of at least 1,000-foot level. So that's looking way up because they're missing a lot of details, and it's a lot of bundling in there. You put all the black businesses in one thing, call them black businesses. That is not the way you deal with equal opportunity or deal with a disparity. The data is stale. Why is it stale? It is pre-COVID-19. The most current data from the graph says year 19. If it's City of Tampa fiscal year 19, that is October 1st, 2018 to September 30th, 2019. Where's the fiscal year 20, October 1st, 2019 to September 30th, 2020? This is January 28th, 2021. And where's that COVID data? Where's all that? A whole year data takes that long to get it? Something's wrong. The data is bundling all services by race, gender, which overlooks two things. Are all business categories getting their ready, willing, and able share? hard to determine when it's bundled. Also gives appearance overall race and gender are doing good, since they're showing total dollars not at 1,000 foot level, but at a 30,000 foot level, which makes the basically data cloudy. They even put footnotes say so, that the data is bundled. Read your footnotes on it. The audit document is 1 page. Really? I did not see my company's concern mentioned, let alone the number of documented complaints. And the complaint form is out of date. It references a 2008 ordinance that they just put on there in December 20th. Now look at your screen. Here's a sample of an error that the department makes because nobody's looking at anything. You see where it says RH and Associates Inc., my consulting engineering firm, and it says current contract value, $1,085,454. If I had a contract like that with the city, I'd buy everybody up their Super Bowl ticket, including the man, everybody. Okay? This is erroneous. How did that get there? It's been there for several months. It causes my company not to get any other work because it's saying, hey, Joe Rouse got plenty of work. Not true. Okay? This is an example of the detail that is not being adhered to with the DMI system. There's problems. But they're doing good overall because I called for them to be fired. I just tell it like it is. I asked for them to be fired and start over. But I'm being compassionate this morning because I'm wearing the Buccaneers Super Bowl thing. So I'm just saying, if they don't get it straight, if they don't listen to somebody been doing business with the city for 30 years, the person that will file the lawsuit, the person that will raise the hell, then, you know, I'm going to do what I got to do.
Thank you
Putting
very
this
much,
on
sir.
my record for $1 million is erroneous, and it needs to be corrected. That is the kind of problems we got. And I waited today to let it be known. Because if you don't know what you're looking at, they can bamboozle you. They're doing a decent job. They're trying to get it right, but we are not there. So hopefully this summer, this next few months, they have town hall meetings about this report. They have outreach and include your NAACP.
Thank you very much,
Empowerment
sir.
Center. Please
Thank you, sir.
include the NAACP Empowerment Center. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. I believe that was our last speaker in the public. Do we have anybody registered to speak? Madam Clerk?
Yes, Chair. The first speaker we have Jacob Kramer.
But is he going to be, okay, go ahead. And then Tyler Hudson, correct?
That is correct.
All right, Mr. Kramer, if you're on the line, go ahead, sir.
Mr. Chair, this is Jake Kramer. I'm here in support of Tyler's amendment. I mean, with your permission, it might be easier if he goes first and then I could just comment on it
All right,
afterwards.
Mr. Hudson, you go first, then we'll go back to Mr. Kramer.
Okay, that sounds good. Good morning, Council. Tyler Hudson, 400 North Ashton Drive. I thought I was actually going to be batting cleanup after LaShawn, so I'll make my remarks fairly brief. I want to thank LaShawn and the city staff for all their hard work on this. We submitted this private initiated amendment back in July to lower the PDA eligibility threshold down from the 50 acres that it's currently set at. LaShawn's presentation is very thorough, and so I'll let her go through that in a second. We did get the unanimous recommendation from the Planning Commission a couple weeks ago. So while she'll go through the what, I'd like to give a little bit about the why and what motivated this. As you all know, large-scale development projects don't happen overnight. University of Tampa, West Shore Marina District, the Heights, those all take some time to develop. They develop in increments and phases. And they're able to develop gradually because they are over 50 acres and they're able to take advantage of this more flexible zoning vehicle called a PDA, a Planned Development Alternative. You all see a lot of PDs. My firm and Jake's firm bring a lot of them to you. A PDA is a little bit different because it allows for the developer to flexibly develop over time by baking in certain uses, upward limits, but not exactly showing you where, for example, the trash compactors are going to be for a piece of the development that might not happen for 5 years. And as Tampa develops, and as LaShawn is going to note in her presentation, that there are fewer and fewer 50-acre parcels left in the city. And if you look at some of the most exciting development opportunities, especially within the proximity to the urban core, you're thinking about Daryl Shaw's project in Ybor City that I'm working on, and he has spoken with some of you about. The West River project that Jake's working on, Rome Yard, RFP, Robles Park. They're much less than 50 acres, but they are going to take some time to develop. And so we think that making projects like that and other projects that are 20 acres or more throughout the city eligible for this PDA is going to really give developers an opportunity to develop in a patient and timely way. I've thought about to try to get a good metaphor for this, and I've struggled, but I think it's a little bit like trying to dress. Right now, you're forcing a 20-acre project to go through the PD process is a little bit like getting dressed without knowing what the weather is and without knowing what city you're in. It's just very difficult to be as specific as the PD code requires. And so respectfully ask for your support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kramer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll keep it brief. You know, if you'll excuse the melodrama here, I think that the PDA process is kind of one of the unsung heroes of redevelopment in the city of Tampa. Frankly, I've been begging some other jurisdictions here in the Tampa Bay area to adopt a similar process. And the reason why is it really allows council to set the long-term policy direction for these big projects with long-term build-out. And there's really just no way with these large projects that developers can commit to some of those, you know, extreme details that Tyler was talking about. You know, I can tell you I worked with my partner, Vin Marchetti, on the Western Marina District, and we really would not have been able to get that project off the ground after the recession without being able to work hand in hand with staff through the PDA process. You know, other projects in the city, like the Encore project, would have benefited from this. You know, I can tell you some things we're looking at in West River would benefit from this process. So with that, you know, just ask for your support. It's a great tool, and it really, you know, allows your staff to shine. So, you know, I'd appreciate your support on this as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes our public comment. I know it goes into item number 2, but before we continue, board members, what did you think of the public comment setup? I think it worked out well.
Sure.
Yep. Well, I think it worked out well, pretty smooth. All right, having said that, we'll go into item number 2. I see.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, you asked a question and I didn't get a chance to. I think it went very well. Volume is the key, though.
Yep.
Volume needs to be raised up, at least in this room. So, my 2 cents. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Councilman Vieira.
I just said, I wanted to say, I think.
Turn your mic on.
Oh, there you go. I just wanted to say I think it's marvelous, and I thank your office, Mr. Chair, and Lisa, and all of the staff here for all of your hard work on this issue. Thank you.
All right, good. Now we go to item number 2. We have Ms. Feely on the line and LaShawn as well. So if you'd like to go ahead.
Can you hear me? Good morning, Chairman and Council. This is LaShawn Doss with Development and Growth Management, and I have with me also Abby Feely, Director of Development and Growth Management. And I'm here to present to you this morning item number 2, which is a privately initiated text amendment. Next slide, please. This is just Council's point of order. This is a time certain item for 10 a.m. and we're a few minutes before that, so I just want to make sure everybody's okay with that as we move forward.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I don't see it. Martin Shelby here. I'm looking at the agenda, and I don't see any specific time attached to it. I'm sorry.
You don't see a specific what?
Time. I heard Ms. Feely. I thought she said 10 a.m.
No, it's just item number 2, and that's it. And it is.
It is 10.
9:58. Okay. So.
I think we're fine going forward, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, there's nothing on the agenda that specifies a time for item number 2. Moving forward with 3 and beyond, it does say 10 a.m. 3 and 4 say 10 a.m. So go ahead, Ms. Feely. Or LaShawn.
Thank you, Council. Thank you so much. The request that's before you today is a privately initiated text amendment. This is a part of the July 2020 amendment cycle. The applicant is Tyler Hudson. This is what I believe you just heard public comment on from Tyler. This request is to amend zoning code section 27-228, which is the PDA requirements for plan development alternatives. Next slide, please. So what I'd like to review with you first, council, is the request itself. The request is to remove the 5-year time frame for phased or incremental development. It is also to reduce PDA required acreage from 50 to 30, and add the requirement to provide public notice at the time of incremental site plan review. Next slide, please. Staff has reviewed the proposed changes and has made the following recommendations, the following changes to the code.
Thank you.
Whenever we receive a privately initiated text amendment, council, we take a look at that code
Mr.
section
Chairman,
and we
Mr.
look for
Chairman.
opportunities to make cleanup.
Just a moment.
I need to talk to the team. We really can't hear you guys. I don't know if you guys are so far away from your computer, or whatever, but we need to get a little closer because we just can't hear what you're saying.
I'm sorry.
We can't hear you very well.
We can't hear you at all, and I went and talked to TNI, they're saying it because you guys are so far away, so we need to you get a little closer so we can hear you. Thank you.
I apologize, let me get closer. Can
No
you hear me
problem.
better?
I really want to understand what this is amendments about, so I can make a good decision on this. That's why I make sure I can hear you.
I'm sorry, can you hear me better now?
No. Not
No?
really.
But we'll go with it, that's all we can do.
Okay, is this any better?
It's about the same. We'll just go ahead, we'll just try to bear through with it today. Go ahead, thank you.
Okay, I apologize. I'll try to speak up. So, staff proposes changes to the code section. We're correcting the department name that is listed within the code section. We're removing the requirement for submittal of hard copy site plans. And we have also added the word applicant to the language just to ensure clarification and consistency in reference to subdivision and commercial plan review process. In that section of the code. Next slide, please. And here are 2 additional changes that staff has requested and recommended for this language to move forward. The first is to reduce the required acreage from 50 to 20. And council, the reason staff felt this change was necessary is 1, it promotes flexibility for larger scale projects and properties. This is some of what Tyler has explained in his comments. But even when you're site planning 20 acres, it is difficult. The applicants have been utilizing that hybrid approach with the PD, with the incremental site plan for the larger scale projects. And that's such as Midtown and Encore. Those are multifaceted projects. They do not meet the 50-acre requirement. And so they're submitting as a PD. They submitted as a PD with incremental. Most recent PDA applications that would have come before council would have been the Heights back in 2013, K-Bar Ranch in 2015. The next change proposed was to remove the requirement to provide public notice at the time of incremental site plan review. So public notice currently is not required by code for an incremental site plan review. To add this requirement would create additional impacts to staff resources, additional costs to the applicant, and create confusion for the public. This would not increase efficiency in the process. One thing I like to remind council is that a PDA comes before council for approval. After that PDA has been approved, the applicant then comes in for incremental site plan review as these entitlements are permitted. So they are providing public notice at the time of PDA. Then they would turn around and have to provide public notice for each incremental review. On the larger scale projects, it could be phased development. We could have 3 or 4 submittals for incremental site plan review. The applicant would be providing public notice each and every time for a project that was approved in the original PDA. And the next slide, please. And what I provided, council, is a chart that just shows the PD, plan development, and the PDA process, just an overview. So for the PD on the left, is for parcels that are up to 50 acres. A detailed site plan is required. City council approval is required, and then they move to permitting. For the PDA on the right side is for parcels over 50 acres. A conceptual site plan is required, and that's a site plan which identifies the overall boundary, and it lists the entitlements. that are allowed within that overall boundary. And typically this occurs with phase development. Then that requires city council approval. And from there, as they are ready to permit the site and they come in to draw down on their entitlements, they submit for incremental site plan review, which is an administrative review, which must be consistent with the overall PDA, which has been approved. Then they move to permitting. Next slide, please. This is that same chart, but this shows the proposed changes. This is with the parcels up to 20 acres on the left for the PD, and then the PDA would change, and then it would be for parcels that are over 20 acres to take advantage of the PDA requirement. And the next slide, please.
Wait, I believe Councilman Dingfelder has a question. Councilman Dingfelder?
Okay.
Sent it to you. Councilman Dingfelder, make sure you're unmuted. You're muted. Please unmute yourself.
Can't hear you.
You're still muted, Dingfelder. We can't hear you. Councilman
Can't hear you.
Dingfelder, we can't hear you. Still muted. Okay, we'll come back to Councilman Dingfelder later. I apologize, LaShawn, if you'd like to continue.
Okay, council, thank you. So this next slide, what we did was I took a look at the city as a whole, and we looked at the overall number of vacant parcels within the city of Tampa. So what we did was we took the chart that you have before you. I put these numbers in. We have on the left side the parcel size, and then on the right side in the blue are the number of parcels. So citywide, you can see it's just important to note that with this request, the parcels that are eligible to utilize the PDA upon this code amendment, there's a total of 291 parcels that would be eligible. So when staff reviewed this data, we felt that the impacts are minimal with this request. And what we did was I took this data and broke it up by Fowler Avenue as the boundary to separate north and south, just because the thought process was that there were more vacant parcels located northeast section of the city, more so than central to the city, which you can see by the data provided. Next slide, please. And so we have our staff findings and recommendations. So one thing I like to remind council is that the PDA is not a Euclidean zoning district. It does not get assigned to properties without an application and an associated public hearing and city council approval. This amendment was routed for city departmental review and received no objections. Development Coordination supports this request and finds that it eliminates the need for administrative reviews, non-substantial changes for project design changes, which typically occur at the time of permitting. This also allows increased flexibility in developing larger parcels. Also, council, the Hillsborough County Planning Commission found the request consistent with the Imagine 2040 Tampa Comprehensive Plan. Next slide, please. The next steps is we have this item scheduled for City Council first reading on February 4th and second reading on February 18th for second reading and final adoption. Next slide, please. And council, I'm available for any questions.
All right, Councilman Dingfelder, have they fixed your technical? No, we can't hear you, and you are unmuted on your end.
You hear me now?
Yeah. There we go. Go ahead, sir.
There was a technical issue. I was okay, but I had to go out and come back in. Anyway, all right, we're all good. LaShawn, I understand the intent of this. I agree with the 50 down to 20 acres. But my question is this in regard to notice and community involvement. You know, the neighborhoods and the community have sort of been requesting and sometimes clamoring for more involvement. And I recognize that traditionally in the PDA, once the PDA was approved, we really didn't have a whole lot of community or even council involvement. But what I wonder about is, and Tyler, you can chime in as well, or Jake, but what I wonder about is as the process goes along, when there's some major decisions to be, you know, that are being made, quote, at the administrative level, that perhaps notice to the community might be appropriate, and feedback from the community to the administration on the various, you know, changes might be a good idea, if you follow me. And I'm not, you know, I'm not saying that that it would come back to council or anything like that. But what I'm saying is sometimes it might be a good idea, instead of staff making these decisions in a vacuum, that you know, that if they say, well, you know what, instead of commercial, we're going to go office. Instead of office, we're going to go residential. You know, for 1,000 units on this project, maybe a little community input wouldn't be a bad thing.
Councilman Goods,
That was my thought.
your microphone.
That was my thought as well. I mean, have we even brought this out to the community to see what the communities think about this at all? LaShawn?
So Councilman Goods, this has been noticed to the public, to the community. We have not received any feedback from the community. Any text amendment that comes through, we advertise it. And
How was it noticed? I know we said we noticed things, but how was it noticed? What was the involvement? Do the neighborhood associations know? You know, I mean, I know we send notices out, but sometimes people don't really know what that notice even is. And that's where it goes into communication again. People can see things, but not read with understanding. I had another community group call me about a zone they got in the mail, had no clue what that meant or how it was. So that's why I don't know. How was the communication getting out to the people so they can know what we're voting on? You know, because if I vote for something and they come at it, why did you vote for that? Well, I thought the community was in favor of that. So I need to know, I mean, how were they communicated to? Just by notice?
Well, we actually, Councilman, what we do is we post it on our website. We also have a monthly Tampa Cares newsletter that goes out. We mail it out. It's the hard copy newsletter that we mail to all neighborhood organizations. We list all text amendments that come through in that newsletter. So they receive the notification by mail through that newsletter. We have, a lot of the neighborhoods are active and they're involved. They receive that notification. Anytime they have questions, they contact our office.
I think that this text amendment is geared up for the east side of town. And that's why I believe this text amendment is really being geared up for the east side of town. And I think that for me to really be voting on something, I need to know and understand that those communities know what we're actually getting prepared to do if we're going to do this. Because for me, this is what I call a planned process. And I think it's getting geared up to bring development to the east side, the northeast and the southeast of my district. And I just want to make sure that the folks in those areas are well aware of what this council may possibly get ready to do.
Thank you very much.
Council, this is Kate Wells. If I could address the comment with regard to community involvement, I just want to remind council this is a privately initiated amendment, and you might want to ask the applicant if they had engaged in that type of communication.
Jay or Tyler, is that how's that work?
I'll take this. Can you all hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, great. So, Councilman Hughes, I'm a resident of your district, and this would affect projects in your district and throughout the city. I would love the chance to sit down with you and chat a little bit about this. This project this amendment was not initiated with respect specifically to anything in the east side of Tampa. This is initiated mostly for the project that I think Daryl Shaw has had a chance to speak with some of you about in Ybor City. to the point that Councilman Dingfelder made, and Councilman Dingfelder, we discussed this, remember, before I filed this amendment, the changes that are approved at the staff level, that incremental site plan that is approved, in my view, that is more akin to a permitting type process. And right now, there is really no public involvement in permitting process. The documents are publicly available through Acela, but the PDA that you all will review for a project that's able to take advantage of this, the public is going to have ample opportunity to weigh in on it, because that PDA plan is going to include the maximum density of the buildings, the maximum height, what the uses are there any waivers, and you as council will have discretion to approve or deny those projects. But the goal here is to allow projects that are going to take time to develop to have some flexibility, because right now, if you're developing a 20 or a 30 acre project, you need to show where the trash compactor is going to be, how are you going to get to the trash compactor, exactly where the buffering and screening are going to go. And if you change that at all after the first year, you're right back before you all at City Council. And while that's good for civil engineers, it's good for land use lawyers, I, with respect, don't think it's particularly good development when there is such a great tool like the PDA available. We just want to make it a bit more broadly available.
Councilman Dingfelder, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tyler, like I said at the beginning, I don't have a problem with reducing the acreage from 50 units to 20 units. But my question is as related to the incremental review. So give me an example, LaShawn or Abby, give me an example of a typical incremental review on a PDA. And I know in the past, most of our PDAs have been, massive projects up in New Tampa and that sort of thing. But give me an example of what type of incremental review might Mr. Shaw be undergoing, or so initially in year one he gets the PDA, and by year three, what sort of incremental reviews or changes might we be seeing?
So I'd like to use the Encore project as an example. The Encore project was a 9-block project, very unique in the fact it did receive NSP funds and was able to build all its infrastructure. And that is up in I believe the 28-acre range. So you have 9 blocks, and then so a PDA is not only the entitlements, and it is not only the setbacks, it is also other design criteria that go ahead and travel with the project. So some refer to it as a bubble plan, but it sets up the bubbles, it assigns the uses to those bubbles, and then it assigns a set of criteria that run with the entire project. When the incremental comes in, you will show us that on block A, this use is going there, it was assigned to go there. So you might have a block A that has residential, hotel, something like that. And then at the time of incremental, you're going to say, I'm drawing down 300 residential units on block A. I am meeting the setbacks. I am meeting these other parameters. And then we ensure that, yes, you are. So when I think about this and the interjection of public notice into that process, really that public notice happened as part of the adoption of the PDA, and the input happened then. So we can't then say the public doesn't like the hotel on block A, because that assignment of rights happened at the time of development. In addition to that,
hold that 1 second. What if the petitioner said, I want to swap from block A to block B, I want to swap the hotel for the residential in that plan? Is that an incremental change, or does that go back to council?
That is unless there were conditions on the PDA that allowed for those swaps to happen, then no, they could not do that in incremental. And it would, the other thing, that's exactly where I was headed. The other thing that runs with each incremental is still those substantial change criteria. You cannot be doing your incremental and triggering a substantial change. And you may, I don't know if you were back when we had that discussion on Harbor Island with part of what had been developed with the Icon residential tower. You know, they said, well, the parking wasn't reviewed. Yes, we review not only everything related to the conditions of the PDA, we also are ensuring that the increment is not tripping a substantial change. So there are those two levels of review, and they get an opportunity for us to say that modification or that entitlement is beyond the conditions of the PDA, and you may either revise it or it is a substantial change and you have to go back to city council.
Okay, last question.
Not free will.
Last question. Is the substantial change language the same in a PD as it is for a PDA?
Yes.
All right, so, Mr. Chairman, I'm
no addition of uses, no increase
I-
over 5%. Yes, all those 9 criteria always travel with each of those increments. You cannot circumvent that by utilizing this process.
and it was interesting, just last week, up in Mr. Vieira's neck of the woods, we had 2 projects that got, pulled out or busted out of the original PDAs, I guess, or the original PDs, and then got changed after 20-something years. So it's kind of interesting that this is happening. Mr. Chairman, I have no other comments, questions, or objections. I do recognize Councilman Good's question related to neighborhood involvement with this text amendment. I'm not saying, LaShawn, that you didn't do your job or in regard to notice. It used to be that FAN would get deeply involved in these types of questions, but I don't know how, functional FAN is anymore. So I don't know. Mr. Goods, if you have an issue in terms of timing on this as related to neighborhood involvement, I'll support you.
I mean, we have 2 neighborhood liaisons. We have Ms. McGregor. We have
Your microphone.
we have 2 neighborhood liaisons. We have Janelle and we have Murray. I understand it's a privately initiated, but I think for me, I can kind of see where this is headed. And again, I want to make sure communities are aware of what may be coming in the future. It may be 20 years down the road, but sometimes you just can't go back and change things once you've done them. So I would recommend that the private initiated folks that are initiating this somehow get with our people possibly, or they can hire whoever to go out and make sure that the community is aware of the future. That way we are on even keel. That's just the way I look at it. I like neighborhoods to know what's going on, because you can sit back at the end of the day.
I've got a suggestion, Mr. Chairman. If is this scheduled for first reading today?
No.
No, sir, this is only the workshop this morning, and it will be scheduled for February 4th for first reading. The other comment I just wanted to make and reiterate is that nobody gets assigned a PDA. This is a code change today that changes the parameters of what that zoning district is, but that is not an assignment by right. So anybody who would be seeking to now participate in a PDA, and they wouldn't have to, they would just have the ability over 20 acres to do that, would still have to come through a rezoning process. There is nothing that is circumventing anything there either. Any changes do have to come back before you, and they would have to apply, and that is where you have the right to say, your bubble is too broad, it's not enough information, all of these things play out.
And I agree with Ms. Feely in regard to that. There's nothing, Mr. Hudson's not bringing a project today, he's just bringing a proposed text amendment, which I'm comfortable with. However, in terms of timing and notice to the community about this text amendment, what I would like to suggest, Mr. Hudson and staff, is we do first reading on the 4th, and then do second reading a month later, and as opposed to 2 weeks later. And then during that month period, we can make sure that the community is better plugged into this than they might otherwise.
Thank you very much. Councilman Vieira, then Mr. Shelby first.
Please.
Go ahead.
Just a reminder, Council, I had the opportunity to conference with the clerk, and interestingly consistent with the discussion of Councilman Dingfelder, I've been informed that the publication deadlines are such for the clerk that second read cannot be on the 18th. So the second reading with publication would be scheduled for March 4th. And that would be the notice of public hearing.
Mr. Vieira.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, you know, the way I read this, it has enough of a, how can I call it, a leash on it where City Council still has an extreme amount of a discretion on what happens. You know, given the fact that it's coming back to us on February 4th, and then its second reading is going to be in March, I think there is more than ample time, I think, for Mr. Hudson to potentially work with. Now, just to be clear, this is not quasi-judicial, correct?
That's correct. This is a text amendment.
That's what I thought. Okay, just making sure that, you know, that gives more than ample time, I think, to address Councilman Good's concerns and whatnot. But I think that if this passes, it has a leash where we can continue to have a hold on it, in my opinion. That being said, you know, all legitimate and good faith concerns should be addressed, but I think that there's more than enough time to address them. And Mr. Hudson has obviously heard Councilman Good's concerns, and I'm sure can proceed with them. I would think.
I'm good with that, Mr. Vieira. I mean, I'm just asking the question because people will ask me the questions down the road. So I like to head off the questions before they even get there.
Yep.
So let's head them off, and then we can go from there.
Councilman Carlson.
Would you mind, Ms. Feely, would you mind just repeating to us along the lines of Councilman Good's concern? Could you just repeat to us what the geographic limitations of this are, and is it possible to tighten it up since it's really about one project? Maybe Tyler.
Yeah, because it's not my understanding that this is about one project, and this would be throughout the city. And in fact, when we analyzed it from a staff perspective, you know, we look at West Shore, we look at what's by the airport, we look at what's up in Councilman Vieira's district across the city. We look also what's down south of Guinea. How would this impact and what parcels? And that's why we gave you kind of that slide on what this would really impact. Now, it would only impact that if those parcels of that size chose to participate in a rezoning or sought some other entitlement. So we kind of analyzed it that way, but it would apply citywide. And then what we were trying to do was show you where in the past it had been executed and how often. This is not a very utilized planning district. It does really take a larger scale project. And in Midtown, which is such a unique situation because they have been able to go vertical on almost every one of those parcels simultaneously, which does not happen. But prior to that being Midtown, that was Tampa-Sphere. It was a PDA from back in the late 80s, early 90s, and that sat there for years and years and years and never got, it had that incremental ability, but never got that. So this would be citywide, and what we've done in the past 2 decades was kind of band-aid it, because to do a PD, and you guys look at PDs all the time, and you see the amount of detail that are in them, when you put that up to 50 acres, which is what the code is now, and that just went into effect in 2008, that 50 quantity went with the PDA, you can't, as Tyler said, put the dumpster on for 50 acres, put the truck circle on for 50 acres. So landscape plans. So this just brings that 50 acres down to 20 and then says, if you're a parcel of 20 acres or more and you would like the potential to proceed with the PDA, you now have it, and here are the conditions that run with it. But it is a public hearing process, and you must petition City Council.
All right. Are there any other questions? If not, we'll wrap it up. So do we need a motion to set this for first reading February 4th?
No, I believe it's already been set.
It's already
but just a reminder to Mr. Hudson that the clerk has informed us that second read would not be on the 18th of February, but would rather be on March 4th.
Okay. Councilman Citro, did you have anything, sir?
No, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Anything else? No? Great. we'll move on to item number 3. We have a PowerPoint regarding parking in the right-of-way, one of the many, many complaints that I receive on an almost daily basis at all hours of the day from my constituents. Go ahead, Vic, I see you on the line.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning, Council. Vic Vide, Director, Mobility Department. I'm here to address item number 3, motion to appear and discuss parking in the rights-of-way, particularly in residential areas. Next slide, please. So broadly, the presentation will kind of outline what the issues are, how we address some of these concerns, and what are some of the things we're looking at going forward. And the details in the motion. Next slide, please. So, quick background, we have plenty of narrow streets, 17 feet or sometimes even narrower, which do have on-street parking as well on them, which may sometimes create concerns. We also do have increasing parking demand. So mid-sized cities across the U.S., car ownership has been going up. And as we grow, we have to address some of these concerns as we move forward. So that's kind of the backdrop to the concern. Next slide, please. I'll go over some of the parking codes and statutes to understand what is allowed, what is not, and how we can address some of the challenges. But most of our code for parking is within Chapter 15. And in essence, parking in front of residences or public driveways is regulated. It is unlawful for anyone to park or stand within 10 feet from the edge of a public or private driveway. Of course, this puts pressures on neighborhoods in terms of availability of parking spaces. It's also unlawful to park a vehicle or stand if the street width is 25 feet or lesser. So that kind of goes back to us having a good portion of narrower streets and the challenges with that. Next slide, please. So Section 1544 states that 10 feet of the roadway must remain open to vehicular traffic. This is for emergency access, for regular conveyance, for bicyclists and pedestrians on streets, especially residential streets where at times we don't have any sidewalks. Next slide, please. And some of the state and city ordinances that kind of apply as well. Things that we look at are driveways, fire hydrants, within 15 feet of fire hydrant. For Florida statutes, you cannot park. You can't park in front of driveways, as we talked about. Crosswalks, you can't park within 20 feet of crosswalks. Again, this is to enhance visibility. And the same applies to traffic control devices like stop signs and traffic signals, where that is actually 30 feet. Now, there is some discretion with some of these numbers depending on geography and the location, but the statute does state that we have to be within 30 feet of the approach. Next slide, please. So our typical process is really case by case, given that we are somewhat limited with the existing rules on very narrow streets, and we've got a couple of examples of these narrow streets, but typically with parking concerns, we either receive a concern from residents or a business. It goes to the mobility department, our customer service folks. Our traffic investigations team is responsible for looking into these. They look at speeding and other issues as well. So they're very familiar with the neighborhoods. And the most typical measures that we take to address parking concerns, not so much capacity related, but there may be a restaurant nearby and people are parking in the neighborhood. and there isn't sufficient width or 10 feet of clearance, like we said. So we do parking restriction signs, and you'll see these all over the city. We notify code enforcement as well because of the city code activation, but also more recently, we've empowered code enforcement to issue parking citations in residential neighborhoods as well, mainly to increase the city's capacity to manage some of these challenges. Next slide, please. We also do have parking restrictions and requests. So vehicles that are parked in violation may be ticketed. The ticket is about $29. It is $29. And as I mentioned, code enforcement can now issue these tickets as well. So that just broadens the pool of folks we have to support our neighborhoods. Next slide, please. We also have a residential parking program that a neighborhood can avail of, and this information is available on our website. We will improve how we communicate that information as well. In essence, a neighborhood can opt to utilize this residential parking permit. The permit is issued to both residents or businesses. Residents can apply for a minimum of one, but can apply for more residential parking permits if their current facility has no off-street parking. They also have the ability to purchase a third permit for potential guests and things like that. Next slide, please. Continuing on this, for businesses with a residential, within a residential parking area, businesses may obtain a minimum of 4 residential parking permits, and they're valid from 4 a.m. to 9 p.m. This is kind of to offset typical residential parking permits that are overnight, in essence. And this is a way for us to accommodate both needs. They may be used interchangeably between business employees and their customers, but they are limited. Next slide, please. We also have guest residential parking permits, and there's a maximum of 1 allowed, and we have some provisions for flexibility to that as well. Where we can do an additional 7 days residential permits for folks that are going to stay for a long time. Next slide, please. Other considerations that we look at and consider are that for residential streets that are less than 17 feet, there is no on-street parking officially permitted, although there are instances where there is parking currently. And then for roadways between 17 and 23 feet, again, these are kind of best practice standards, if you will. Parking is permitted on one side, but typically, especially as you get closer to that 23, there are cases where that may not be, and there are folks parking on both sides. Again, as long as we've got that 10 feet of space, enough for emergency vehicles to get through, those are the things we look at on a case-by-case basis. And then you've got your wider rights of way where you have greater than 23 feet, and you can park on both sides. And we could even consider parking aisles at that point. Next slide, please. Other considerations with residential parking is it's actually good for traffic calming in that just the presence of these parked vehicles slow the streets down a little bit. This has been documented by a study done by NACTO, which is the National Association of City Transportation Officials. They call it yield streets almost because it increases the awareness of motorists going through these neighborhoods. Next slide, please. So other considerations are how do we grow? We know we're growing rapidly. we know that not only will our residential population increase, we will continue to be the job center for our region. And this does put some pressures on our residential streets as we move forward. And really, it's a multi-pronged strategy to address some of these issues. So we're looking at fostering transit, which will certainly help distribute the modes that are available for people to move forward. This is a long-term undertaking in terms of development of viable transit options citywide. Certainly, we're looking at parking policy as well and looking at parking requirements and how they apply to residential areas. And then through our MOVES process, our mobility master plan, if you will, one of the things we're looking at is reclassification of all of our streets within the city and looking at where targeted investments would most benefit when it comes to residential design and configuration. Next slide, please. That's all I have. Happy to take any questions and provide clarity.
Councilman Citro.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Vic, as always, great presentation, and thank you for all you do within our city with mobility. Council members, the reason why I asked Vic to make this presentation today is because our streets were plotted and our land was plotted at a time when each household only had one vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
And many of our streets do not have sidewalks. So as I'm going through many sections of Tampa, East Tampa, West Tampa, South Tampa, I am seeing women pushing their baby strollers in the streets, kids having to walk to school in the streets. But my main concern was the safety and the access by first responders. When we have small streets and both sides of the streets are lined with cars, it's difficult for our first responders to get down the streets. So I, like all of us, have had calls from constituents saying, what are we going to do about this? I wanted to let the public know that we are concerned, Vic with mobility is concerned, and we are looking at trying to rectify this problem. I hope it doesn't come to this, but as the city grows, we're going to have to decide on how parking is on our streets. But I wanted to assure everybody in Tampa that we are working on some solutions to this problem. We are also getting calls, if I may say, of people parking their vehicles on the actual right-of-way, that space between the sidewalks and the street. And I want our citizens to know that, yes, mobility is looking at this situation. Vic, as always, again, thank you for the work you do. Mr. Chair, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much. And to piggyback on some of your comments, we have issues throughout West Tampa specifically, throughout the city of Tampa, but in many neighborhoods that I represent, that we all represent, commercial vehicles parking all day in neighborhoods. As Councilman Citro has mentioned, vehicles, employee vehicles parking on right-of-ways where there are sidewalks and where there are not sidewalks. And not only is it a safety issue, it deteriorates the look of the neighborhood. And when I say that, you know, everybody says, I'm a taxpayer, I pay my taxes. And it's true. You know, they pay their taxes, the American dream is oftentimes considered as home ownership. And when people put so much of their earnings into their mortgages, into their homes, into that American dream, and they see that their neighborhoods deteriorating because of commercial vehicles, because of employees parking from certain businesses on the right-of-way, narrowing the streets, making it harder for emergency vehicles, making it harder for that mother, as Councilman Citro mentioned, to push that stroller, someone that is in a wheelchair to get through there. We're going to have issues where people are going to get hit, pedestrians are going to get hit, emergency vehicles won't be able to get through in time. But again, just simple respect for the neighborhood. I mean, you can't just have these cars flooding areas because a certain business decides to move in without ample parking. We have to look at the code. We have to look at, you know, what's in violation and what's not, because I'm getting calls every day, or someone contacts, emails, whatever it is, but it's every day that I'm hearing it. And every day I'm driving through these neighborhoods because I see it firsthand. So I appreciate that you've brought this up, and Councilman Carlson, I know, seconded the motion, and we're having this discussion. Do you have anything else? Councilman Carlson.
Sorry to go after you, but one of the big problems that we've faced is enforcement, and that's not really Vic's area. And I know Osea and her team have been working on it. John Bennett has been working on it. In the Deacle area, the folks are upset because Uber drivers and others, delivery drivers, park in front of park illegally in front of driveways. They park in front of fire hydrants and other things, and it's hard to get the police to come because they have more important things to do. Chief Bennett, working with code enforcement, has set up a new division that we asked for a year or more ago, and my understanding is it's going to kick off soon. It's taken a long time for that to start. I've asked the folks from that unit to give us an update. Maybe we should get them to come officially before City Council. But without enforcement, none of this matters, because if people can get away with parking in front of your driveway and parking in front of a fire hydrant, then that's a big problem. The other thing is, a year and a half ago or so, we passed a motion to ask the administration to create a citywide sidewalk plan and a citywide bicycle plan. If the Supreme Court votes to uphold all for transportation or some part of it, then we would suddenly have a lot of money to work with that. But to Councilman Citro's point, if we have those plans, then we can talk to neighborhoods about what we can do and can't do and what the timing of it is, and the same thing's happening in parks. Vic's team took our requests and put them into the mobility plan process, which looks at all of it together. But as that starts to roll out, I think we need to really engage neighborhoods and communities to talk to them about the options, talk to them about the problems they're facing, and try to solve them. Because, as we've said many times, especially because of COVID, neighborhoods and people in their communities are very concerned about what's going on with them, because they're working and sleeping and doing their entertainment in their neighborhoods. And also, neighborhoods felt like, outside of downtown, felt like they were ignored for many years. So we need to try to play catch up here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else?
Again, Vic, thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up is item number 4, to discuss parking concerns in Ybor on 7th Avenue and surrounding neighborhoods. Go ahead, sir.
Sure. Thank you, Chair and Councilman. I do have a presentation.
Can I ask
on
a
this
quick question?
Yes.
Marty, I forgot to ask you about this. Can I ask you, my office is on 7th Avenue, and potentially my customers would park on 7th Avenue. Do I have a conflict? Should I step out, or can I talk about this issue?
You can talk about this issue at this point.
It's okay? It's not a conflict? Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair and Council. Vic Bide, Director of Mobility Department. I'm here to address item number 4. Motion made by Councilman Citro and Councilman Carlson to appear and discuss parking concerns in Ybor City, particularly on 7th Avenue and the surrounding neighborhoods. We do have a presentation for it, so if we can bring that up. Well, I do have it up here as well on my computer, so I can walk through that if that works. Try to share my screen. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you. So this is the area around 7th Avenue that the parking division operates parking on street as well as off street. It's Palm to the north, 3rd Avenue to the south, Nuccio Parkway to the west, and 22nd Street to the east. So this is the area that we're looking at and discussing, particularly 7th Avenue that is the primary commercial spine. So some of the challenges that we have on 7th Avenue, especially when it comes to parking, one is the lack of turnover. Oftentimes, the folks that arrive early on 7th Avenue can be employees and staff, and they park on 7th Avenue, which creates lesser opportunities for customers at times. Then there's freight. We don't have enough dedicated freight spaces, given the amount of commercial activity, retail activity along 7th Avenue. So that leads to delivery trucks, double parking at times, and creating congestion, also creating additional emissions. We also have a lot of motorcycle enthusiasts that do fly 7th Avenue. Sometimes we find, like the picture shown in the presentation, that multiple bikes are parked either in one space or a couple of spaces and a whole bunch of bikes. They're either idling or playing loud music or just, parked there at times. Oftentimes, these can be reserved metered parking spaces that are dedicated for a specific purpose and reserved by a separate entity. This also adds to the congestion because when these spaces are occupied in this manner, people continue to drive around looking for parking spaces on 7th Avenue.
Vic, Mr. Chair, could I make a comment while that picture's up?
Please.
You all may know, but I think that's the Italian Club, and at least I've seen pictures just like that of the Italian Club. And the problem is that they have weddings there. People spend a lot of money on weddings, and then they walk out, and there's a lot of noise and other things going on there. And so I just wanted to add a little bit of flavor to that.
And if I may also, Vic, very quickly, to your point, Councilman Carlson, when those parking spaces are reserved, what's called bagged, and there is actually these bright red bags or orange bags that are placed there to reserve those parking spots. Now, I'm not going to condemn any motorcycle rider because I am a motorcycle rider, but when you reserve a parking space, it's reserved for that event. And some of these people, whether they're in cars or motorcycles, go down there and park past the extended time of 2 hours. So, yes, I've heard the same phone calls as you. Please, Vic, go ahead.
Thank you, Councilman. And that's a good point because with limited controls, we have limited incentive or the community has limited incentives to curb some of these behaviors. So we work with code, we work with TPD, but if they're repetitive, it becomes very hard to have the resources to stay on it. We do have better ways to address some of these challenges, and we're working with YCDC and some of the stakeholders in the area. So some of the things that we're proposing to address these challenges include, increasing enforcement. We've done some of these already. Increase the enforcement of the 2-hour spaces. A lot of these on-street spaces are 2-hour spaces, and they're 2-hour spaces because it's a Main Street commercial district. You want that turnover on this street, and that really helps. But that enforcement also comes with a need for resources, and if there aren't any resources generated on that commercial district, then it puts additional pressures on us. We're also moving towards flex spaces. And really the reason for moving towards flex spaces is to, one, recognize that needs of a corridor or a roadway might change over time and space. And I'll give you an example. Hotels, for example, have checkout and check-in needs, 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. typically. Their loading, unloading might be in the morning. And then in the evenings, that space might be more for pickup and drop off and things like that. And so we're right now experimenting with these type of flex spaces for different uses to see how we can service more people an hour rather than just have a car parked there, which is typically a single occupant vehicle. So these are some of the things we're looking at. We're also looking at the code and are there any code changes, but I'd like to temper that only because we're going through the moves process and the reclassification of all of our streets to understand what their purpose is to our context today. And that information will really help towards fashioning a better policy. We have moved to new bags, so Councilman Cipro was right. We have the red bags, but we're moving to much larger bags that make it very clear what the intent of the space is. The picture to your right kind of shows that. And we've, of course, shared this with our partners in code enforcement and TPD as well to again, improve our enforcement and management efforts. This is the general inventory of spaces. We have about 24 motorcycle spaces, 9 on the 1200 block of 8, 15 spaces on 16th Street. We have 35 freight spaces across the district. But again, we recognize that the freight need is higher, and we're looking at options like we outlined earlier. We have about 373 sign spaces and a 2,400 garage, which is the Ybor garage. So that's kind of the backdrop of the challenges, some of the things that we're looking at, and we continue to work with the community to address some of these items. At this point, I'll be happy to take questions. Thank you.
Councilman Citro?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Vic, again, a wonderful presentation. To Councilman Carlson's point, the staffing to go out and make sure that these parking spaces where people are parking correctly, we just don't have the staffing right now. Maybe we should think about hiring more people in parking divisions and give them parking tickets so they can hand them out. Is there any thought to maybe a motorcycle parking on the side streets, say 15th to 22nd, and have them park on that side of the street? And to your slide presentation, yes, we have employees that park outside of their business and stay there all day and all night instead of the 2-hour parking that they're allowed on 7th Avenue. These are all things that we can look at, but again, Vic, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yep. Councilman Carlson?
2 things real fast. Vic, and I mentioned this to you privately, I wish that we could push, and this goes with other parts of town too, I wish we could push more people to the app. And there's some arguments about that people over 80 or others can't use apps or don't know how to use them. I have a lot of friends who are over 80 and they're able to use apps just fine. But I wish we could, we have the kiosk also if people don't want to use the apps, but I wish we could send people the apps so that they have to sign up for the 2-hour free parking, and then it would text them or alert them when it's over. And if we somewhere in the city have a policy that's 2 hours free, and then we would charge after that, we would already have them in the system, so it would just start charging them. Or where it runs out, maybe a big red sign would pop up on their phone and tell them that they can't park there anymore. The second thing is that we're also getting feedback for this and other issues that the city is trying to fleece or rip off the public because of parking. Could you go back and, there are concerns of people who think that on 7th Avenue that folks are parking too long and it needs to turn over so that businesses can get more business. I know because my office is there, some office workers just park all day long in the 2-hour. People all around where my office is, they park there, and nobody in the year and a half or whatever we've been there, nobody ever comes to give them any tickets. They just park there all the time, and so the restaurants and retailers can't get any business. But besides the complaints we've heard from the retailers and restaurateurs about wanting turnover, can you tell us and tell the public what your reasons are for parking enforcement and raising parking fees?
Sure. I'll be happy to do that. And to your first point about apps, we're currently in the process of wrapping up a procurement to introduce more apps, parking apps within the city. And this isn't to, complicate matters as much as this is to have, there are maybe 3 or 4 very commonly used apps across the US. And what we want to be able to do is, no matter where you may be, if you're visiting us, whatever app you might be using at home should be able to work here as well. It also creates a little more competition. Currently, we only have one app vendor. So once we finalize these apps, we're actually going to put together, in partnership with these app folks, a customer-oriented group within the parking division, a couple of staff members that will first get trained on these apps really well, and then we'll reach out, and we'll create a program to reach out to businesses, to places of worship, to the community at large, and train people on these apps. And yes, some of these apps are actually pretty easy to use once they're installed and once you know how to navigate them. But we're cognizant of that as well. On the reason for the parking changes that we're making, it's really kind of goes back to the rabbi's invocation from this morning. We're planting seeds of a strategy that will really express itself 20, 30 years from now. That's when we're going to have very acute challenges around climate change, and a lot of things are related to parking. One quick thing on parking itself. Parking takes up a lot of space in most urban areas. Mid-sized cities, about a third of downtowns are nothing but parking space. Each space can cost up to $20,000 in garages, much lesser, of course, on an on-street basis, but that's prime real estate. And single occupant vehicles get used about 5-6% of the time. So parking is a very expensive item when it comes to mobility. Of course, having your personal vehicle is very good, very convenient. I enjoy my vehicle, but that's the backdrop. So what we're doing is we're updating our parking prices. We have updated our parking prices, mainly because we hadn't updated prices in like 16 years. And we weren't able to sustain the current parking enterprise, let alone invest in the future. So this is a two-step plan. One is to make ourselves whole in terms of being able to support the services that we provide right now. The other is to incent behaviors. Some of these strategies are pretty well studied. So Main Street corridors, even 7th Avenue, for example, potentially on-street paid parking will address the issue of transients out here. Now, we understand that the community, may feel differently about it in certain cases, and that's why we're giving ourselves a whole year to work with the community, to work through YCDC, to work with the businesses and residents, to really see what will work best to manage some of those challenges on 7th Avenue. The other thing with parking is it is intricately tied to housing affordability. It's kind of not very intuitive, and it is baked into our strategy. So our strategy is kind of three-pronged when you look at transforming Tampa's tomorrow. Sustainability, resilience, housing affordability, all of that, and transportation. So pricing parking correctly incents behavioral changes. The next step of that strategy is parking requirements and updating parking requirements within developments and within new units. And what that does is, if you manage the parking requirements correctly, the available real estate for housing stock increases, and that puts downward pressure on housing prices as well. So that is related to how much we charge for parking, both on-street and off-street, and what operations we do. And the end game from this is, of course, sustainability benefits, housing affordability, and of course, incenting people to use transit and alternate modes of transportation. It is understood that today we do not have the level of public transportation and bike walk and other connectivity modes that we need to make that complete transformation and make it as convenient as using a personal vehicle. But that journey starts with parking policy reform. And so it does have some short-term consequences, which we will continue to work and manage. But the long game is really to address all of these multiple issues together.
Just respond real fast. Just real fast. Thank you for all that. I know Public Works has hired a new communication person at our recommendation, and I know that you all are gearing up trying to engage the public in lots of ways. Everything you just said, I think, needs to get out to as many residents as possible and in as many ways as possible, and it needs to be two-way where we hear back and forth. The Bay to Bay issue was prior administration, but the communication was not handled well at all, and I think that's what everybody's trying to avoid here. And one last thing is, Vic really walks the walk. You see his parking spaces behind him. I pass him almost every day driving while he's riding his bike diligently to work. So thank you for your reducing your carbon footprint, and hopefully I can do it one day soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Goods. Councilman Citro, correct?
You know, I have good friends that work down in Ybor, Vic, and we always talk about the long-range goals. And I guess I have the old police officer mentality. I don't have the option of a long-range goal. I have to fix the problem as soon as possible. When I look at Ybor and I go down and see all the motorcycles that are parked all down on Ybor, you have to have a plan. And I'm trying to figure out what the plan is, because I look at the workers down there, a lot of workers. Well, they need somewhere place to park. Maybe they need their own parking lot or what have you for the workers, so that way you free up your parking spaces for those folks who come in town, those who want to go down there for lunch. And now the business owners park in that lot, the employees park in that particular lot. And it might be a small minimum fee you have to charge for that, but I think a lot of them hate working, have to go back to the parking meter. Boss, I need to go pay more money in the meter. I just look at solutions. You know, we talk about long-range goals. I'm not a long-range goals type of guy. I'm a guy that, what's the problem? How can I fix the problem now? How can I get a fix on it now? And then I can work for a long range. But can I fix it right now? And how would I fix it? And for me, to me, it's simple. To me, I mean, I go down there, Ybor, I don't go a lot now, but the motorcycles park, take up all the spaces, revving the engines, the noise. I mean, I went down there maybe a month ago just to walk, just to see what's going on in my district. And the little Spanish club that has a cigar, and I went to sit down out there for social distancing, sit down. I couldn't even sit there because of the combustion from the motorcycles, the noise, the revving of the engines. So I think we have to look at the solutions now. And to me, I think there are some quick fixes. I think if you look at you putting those signs out in those evening times saying no motorcycles parked, or like Mr. Citro say, have a designated place for those motorcycles, have a designated spot to where we can say, okay, we're going to help our citizens who are workers here with their paycheck, so their paycheck isn't all going to parking. Let's do something with the owners to make sure that so we know, have communications. And I've said this from day one, communication. Mr. Carlson repeats it. You know, I don't like to pick on the police department. I get so upset sometimes that I hear about shootings or something happens and I don't know about it till residents come and call me about it. But I think it's totally crazy. We're all council members here. We have a district and we need to know what's going on. Not everything's a secret. We don't, care about how you internal stuff, or just what's going on. I think Ms. Carlson right, even with parking. I'm glad that solid waste has done that as well. It's a good thing. But I think that there are some quick fixes. I hope that you and your staff will look at some of those quick fixes, because I think you have some lots that you might can turn in, or look at what you can turn into a place for employees, because that's what they're asking about. The employees are asking about that, to where they may pay something by the month or what have you, but I think they're valued to pay that. Or I talked to a couple of business owners, well, we could pay for our employees for the month or someplace. So these are the conversations I think that are quick fixes that need to take place to get things moving and get things moving now. So hoping that you'll take that and take that back to your staff, and we can see if we can come up with a plan with that. I yield back, and thank you again for your work, Vic.
Thank you, Councilman Citro.
You took the words right out of my mouth, Councilman Goods. When I was with YCDC, we had been hearing about this from employers and employees alike, that there is nowhere for the employees to park. I'm hoping that something could be done rather quickly, where discounted rates within our two parking garages, Fernando Noriega and the 15th Street parking, for businesses, restaurant or otherwise, to have spaces available for their employees in these parking lots at some sort of rate that the businesses and/or the employees can afford. So, Vic, if you could look into that, maybe report back to us in the next couple of months or something, whether it be individually or in front of council again. But yes, that is another key to the parking situation. Vic, again, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anybody else? Councilman Dingfelder, if you're on the line. All right, hearing none, I do have an item. I know Vic is here before us. I have an item that I'm going to bring up during new business. I'm sure you all know what it is, because...
What is it?
Yeah, I can bring it up now. Vic,
He's here.
all right.
Yeah, I think it would be better.
All right, let's do this. We received a huge amount of emails and communication from folks in downtown regarding a previously passed ordinance from a few months ago, 2020-122, regarding the new parking rates. It's an overwhelming response from downtown residents, churchgoers, people using the Riverwalk and whatnot. My motion would be that we repeal the previously passed ordinance, at least temporarily, and temporarily go back to the language of what we had on the books with the previous rules regarding parking downtown. While we figured this out, my intentions are that we look at downtown parking and don't start charging until at least 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And the reason is you have so many people that come down to go to church. You have so many people that are exercising in the morning. You have, other folks that utilize downtown street parking. Perhaps we could look at doing it within a certain area, within a few blocks of downtown that we do this. What I want to know is what the financial impact would be. I think it's minimal because it is Sunday, and historically Sunday has been free. So it's just basically like free until 1 or 2 in the afternoon. I think this would alleviate a lot of the concerns of folks downtown. I don't think it's too much to ask. While this is up in the air, as we figure this out, how much time do you think legal or you yourself, Vic, would need that we can bring this back up and come to a solution? Would a month? Would a few weeks?
A month would suffice. We would certainly be able to, look into some potential policies. Chairman, if I may, I'd like to kind of provide a quick background on this because we have made some accommodations. I mean, we talked about the long-term picture, certainly. We did look at, I think Councilman Dingfelder wants to.
Yeah, Councilman Dingfelder.
No, I was raising my hand when you're done, Vic. When you're done.
So we did consider, the entire community and their needs within this area. Even when we structured the policy and kind of did away with the previous rule of everything north of Kennedy be free on weekends and times. So one of the things we have done is we have created free parking until 1 p.m. on weekends for the entire community. It has 320 spaces at the Scott Street lot. Now, this Scott Street lot is granted about 8 minutes walking distance within a lot of the areas around, Twigs, Kennedy, Zach, and that, and also the Ashley. This is available right now. This has been made available right now. The other thing is for patrons that may be disabled and have a decal. They can park anywhere on street, free of cost for up to 4 hours. So we have that provision also, and then a lot of the community needs where they have historically been parking on street. There are alternatives as well that are currently available. It's just if parking on street is free, it's more convenient to park a block away, and I understand that certainly. But I do want to highlight that if we go back to the previous policy, that impacts about 1,350 spaces, and really the need right now that we're looking at, or the condition we're looking at, is, I understand it's a short-term concern, we're in the middle of a pandemic, but it will impact our long-term strategy. In the previous point where I was talking about the long-term strategy, there are impacts to it, especially within the downtown, because as the county grows, and a lot of the population growth is going to be in South County, but the jobs will still be within downtown and West Shore and the urban core. And the concern is, how do we want people, or how do we want the community to best access some of these areas in the long term, such that we mitigate effects of climate change, we mitigate the crashes and some of the congestion. And so it's really, please consider the short term and long term, and based on that, we'd be able to look at something in the short term.
All right, Councilman Dingfelder.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Vic. And Vic and I talked about this at length yesterday, and frankly, I think, Mr. Chairman, I'll be glad to second your motion. I think that in regard to the Sunday morning, there's no competition for spaces downtown on Sunday morning, and I think that inflicting that kind of pain on the limited number of folks who do want to come downtown on Sunday morning, I think we have to weigh the costs and the benefits, and I just can't. It's unfortunate. Yes, council did this. We didn't have any particular discussion on it on this particular issue, but it's now popped up as a flashpoint, and I think we should address it. I think we should address it quickly. I think we should rescind 20-122 and we can rescind it right away, probably at our February 4th meeting, Mr. Chairman. And Stat Legal can tell us otherwise, but I think we could rescind it very, very quickly, and then staff can come back to us
March 4th
with an additional. Quickly in February. I think we should rescind it, and then they can come back to us at some later date with some other proposals.
Okay, so I would say to rescind it or repeal it, whatever word you want to use, February 4th, but Vic had mentioned at least 30 days, which would put us March 4th. So March 4th, staff can come back with some solutions and discussion. And I'm happy to help because I have my ideas of how we could do this. But so we'll do that. Councilman Citro, then Councilman Carlson, then Councilman Vieira.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm not looking at rescinding this whole thing in all of downtown Tampa. My thoughts are Twiggs to the north, Florida to the west, Pierce to the east, and Kennedy to the south. Now, if we're talking about churches, then we're also talking about the other things that go along with those churches. So if we're talking about Sunday, then you're taking away the other nights of the week where Alcoholics Anonymous may be meeting. You're taking away other nights of the week where choirs may be meeting with these churches. You're taking away other nights of the week where these churches hold nonprofit organizations or nonprofit helps at these churches. So just to say Sunday, I don't think you're doing the greatest benefit to these churches. Yes, that's when the parishioners go into worship. But there are other organizations downtown that have youth groups, that are fraternal organizations, that have been relying on these parking spaces for free so their memberships can go down there other days than Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturdays. So in my little square area, again, Twiggs to the north, Florida to the west, Pierce to the east, and Kennedy to the south, I would also like to look at the rest of the week, after 6 o'clock till 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock the next morning, or 6 o'clock until midnight. So I'm just throwing my 2 cents in. As far as the rest of downtown goes, in my opinion, rip the Band-Aid off. Let's go ahead and start charging for parking with the exception of this designated area.
Very good.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Carlson, then Councilman Vieira.
Yeah, I'm against rolling back the whole ordinance. I think what I would recommend is that we ask staff to come back with a specific recommendation regarding this issue. And by the way, I don't think you said it yet, Vic, but I think legal has told you that we can't just target churches. It has to be something broader. We got a lot of emails, but frankly, we're going to get a lot more emails about toilet to tap next week. And so I hope you all respond similarly on that.
So pure.
Yeah. Pure toilet water is what I'm calling it now. But anyway, what I think the long-term solution is something like what I said for Ybor, which is where we have an app, or you said series of apps, where you'll set up tents and train folks, and you'll go to the churches and wherever else and train folks on how to use them. But and there'll be kiosks, but where they can get maybe 2 hours free parking, and they can choose. We can set the day or whatever. But eventually, we've got to switch to this kind of system. And most of the emails talked about COVID as being temporarily hurting the churches and other activities in downtown. And so my recommendation is that if we do anything, it would be a like surgical specific area to maybe delay just downtown on Sunday for a few hours, maybe for a few blocks, while you come up with a longer term solution. And in the short term, maybe it would be that we would delay it through all of this year, whenever we think COVID is going to be done. Thank you.
Councilman Vieira, Councilman Goods, then Councilman Dingfelder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I agree with Councilman Carlson in the sense that, whatever we do, we ought to have it narrowly tailored. I know that, and I thought of that as well, which is obviously we can't tailor this to religious organizations. I prefer to call it partners in improving the community. That could include civic organizations, that could include religions, or strike that, organizations that happen to be religious. And we have to understand that, by putting a fee or an assessment, whenever you, I don't want to, when I use the word tax, I don't mean it literally like a tax, but whenever you put a fee or a tax, whatever you want to call it, on something, you're going to ultimately inadvertently discourage a behavior. You got to weigh, as Councilman Dingfelder said, the benefits and the detriments of a particular action. So I think, as Councilman Carlson said, we have to narrowly tailor this. Obviously, it got me thinking back, because back in 2010 to 11 to 12, on virtually every single Saturday night, I was there with my son at Sacred Heart Catholic Church, which is one of the best churches, and just regardless of your religious faith, if any, is just a wonderful institution. My great grandparents used to go there, and my grandmother and my uncle used to go there like 85 years ago or so. So I have a lot of sentimentality for that church. But there's a lot of different civic institutions that are religious as well as secular there that could be detrimentally affected by this. But we've got to do it in a narrowly tailored way to take a look at the overall agenda that mobility was trying to have in terms of promoting this. There could be some adverse effects that we didn't consider initially. Let's take a look at those, but let's make it narrowly tailored and come back quickly to get the job done. Thank you.
Councilman Goods and Dingfelder, if we can wrap it up there.
Very quickly, Chair, thank you for your leadership again this morning. I've raised in the church, understand the church. My mother's the mother of the church, so I understand how churches, feel that they have their base. But when I look at the church, I think there can be some alternatives. I mean, most churches I know to or attend, they have the church van, a church bus. I don't know if we have our trolley that runs on Sunday. I'm not too sure or not, or streetcar, to where if you have a designated site for the church parishioners, that trolley can pick them up and take them to the church. If we can't curtail the perfect fit, there's still a point of transportation, place safe for their vehicles as well, and a mechanism that can get them to the church on time and so forth. So, I mean, we can curtail some things, but maybe we should look at that as an option as well, to where if we're talking about specifically for the church, and most of the emails I've gotten have been from the church, and maybe we can get a partnership that way with the church as far as maybe having a trolley system. Because, like, again, I say, with most of the churches I've attended, they always have the church van or the church bus that deal with their parishioners, make sure they get in the church on time, and making sure for those who may not have vehicles are being dropped off. it may be an avenue. So that's just my thought.
Thank you very much. Councilman Dingfelder, and we'll finish there.
Well, I never mentioned the word church in regard to this, and I don't think we should. I think this is about people who use downtown and when they use it. And we've gotten a lot of emails from downtown residents, and they're concerned that if they have guests spend the night on a Saturday night, that they have nowhere to park, and it rolls over into Sunday morning. So this is broader than just churches. I think here's my problem, and with all due respect to my friend Mr. Bide, if we just leave it up to staff and say, okay, staff, come back to us with recommendations. Well, I heard Mr. Bide loud and clear. He and I talked for probably 45 minutes yesterday. He's not in favor of changing anything. And I understand that. That's his professional opinion, and I respect it. And I admire it because it's, as the rabbi said, it's looking into the future about, in a perfect world, where we need to be. But unfortunately, the reality, and I think Councilman Goods said this, is we also have to look at where we're at today. And you know, we have hit folks in the head with a pan without much discussion, without probably hardly any discussion whatsoever. And now we're seeing the results of it. I honestly have thought about this long and hard, and I feel that it's extremely important that right now we roll back this issue on Sunday morning parking. Okay? I'm not going to call it church, not going to call it anything religious. Mr. Citro, I agree with you. It's not citywide. It's on a limited basis. I don't have the street parameters exactly, but you know, frankly, it needs to be a pretty large area north of Kennedy that we're talking about. But I think we need to roll this thing back as quickly as possible and just focus on some of the other areas and issues that are a little more attainable right now. So that's how we get there, Mr. Chairman. I'll leave that up to you since you're the one who brought this up and put it in a memo form, and I admire you for that. But I feel very, very strongly that we need to address it quickly and with strong direction to Mr. Bide and his team. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So my motion would be on February 4th, that we rescind or repeal ordinance 2020-122, and in the meantime, temporarily go back to the language of the previous rules, meaning we suspend that enforcement of these new rules, and March 4th, if staff will come back to council with an update as how we can move forward. Again, I'm happy to talk to transportation staff. We've heard from all the council members. Councilman Citro gave some specifics to some boundaries. Councilman Carlson, Councilman Dingfelder, everybody's mentioned something. So that is my motion, that February 4th, we bring it on the agenda to repeal ordinance 2020-122.
Madam Clerk, did you get that motion?
I have it written down if you need it.
Okay. We have a motion.
Wait, Councilman or Mr. Shelby?
Yes, Council, thank you. Martin Shelby, City Council Attorney. Just a reminder, Council, the subject matter is coming back per your motion, but the Florida statutes does require that ordinances go forward as you've experienced them through the process of 2 readings by in full or title only, usually is what we do, so that I believe your intention is on bringing something back on the 4th, and I suspect my thought would be that whatever legal issues may have to be addressed in order to effectuate that, the legal department will work with council to be able to inform you as to how best to proceed based on your motion.
And we have, I mean, if we need a second reading there, we have another council regular session on the 18th of February. So it still falls within should fall within, you know, all the legal dates before March 4th, before everything else.
If I can, Mr. Chairman, again, the issue with the second reading is the same issue we had with the PDA matter, in that the publication deadlines required by Florida statutes, the clerk tells me that March 4th would be your earliest second reading if you do a first reading. Again, counsel, my understanding is, and Ms. Zellman did remind me, that your agenda for next week is pretty much set and ready to rock and roll with the draft tomorrow. This would have to be added on in some form or fashion, and that would have to be worked out logistically to get it on the 4th of February.
You know, staff walks on items, Mr. Chairman, if I could, staff walks on items all the time at the last minute. This is an item that's important to the community. I think we have the ability to walk it on.
Yeah, I don't see, I'm always saying yes when they have last minute things. I'm an accommodating guy, so, and I don't ask much. Councilman Carlson.
Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
I will confirm this later today, but it's likely that we may not need to repeal the ordinance, that we can still work within the existing framework. But I would like the opportunity to follow up later today on that.
Yeah,
That's fair.
my question is, and I don't know if this is illegal or whatever, instead of rescinding the entire ordinance, can we just affect certain part of it? I would be willing to vote for that. Rescinding the entire ordinance opens up a whole other set of long discussions, and we could get hundreds more emails about other things and other issues related to this. My second question is, so in the short term, if this is going to be in effect maybe until March 4th, does City Council have any power to ask or restrict the administration from enforcing it in downtown? Is there we don't have any, I know we don't have any authority over the executive branch, but can we pass something that would prohibit enforcement of it?
Frankly, with that ordinance on the books, technically no. You certainly can ask the administration. You certainly can see if you can seek some sort of agreement from the administration. But with regard to what you first said, if it's the consensus of council to rather rescind it, but to amend, taking into account what the consensus of council is, if that's clear as part of the motion, if that's acceptable to the maker of the motion and the second, then that could be included as another option for the administration, for the legal department to see how to address this.
Mr. Chair, I'm saying this to
account.
try to be helpful and supportive, but it would, I would suggest that we limit your motion to that section that pertains to of the ordinance that pertains to downtown and maybe even specifically Sunday. But I would be open if you made a second motion to ask the administration not to, we'll say it in a nice way, but not to punish people on Sunday mornings. No, Dingfelder's saying no. The problem is that whatever we do today or whatever we do on February 4th, if it takes all the way until March 4th, there are going to be a bunch of $35 tickets, and we're going to get thousands of emails.
Yep.
And so is there anything that we can do? I'm sure the administration's watching. Maybe we don't have to make a motion, but we need a short-term solution, and then we need a longer-term solution.
Yes, that's the motion.
Mr. Chairman, this is Gina Grimes, the city attorney.
Yes.
Both Mr. Carlson and Mr. Shelby were correct that we can draft an ordinance amending a portion of the ordinance that was previously changed. It does not have to apply citywide as far as the changes that you discussed. So we can amend it so that it applies only in downtown on certain days. We can bring it back on February 4th. As far as the enforcement issue, Mr. Shelby is correct that you don't have the authority to direct whether or not to enforce ordinances that are validly adopted laws, but I will be happy to discuss with Mr. Bidey and the administration your request.
Great.
Mr. Chair, and again, if I may, there are other things that these organizations in the area that I suggested, Twigs to the north, Lord to the west, Pierce to the east, Kennedy to the south, that do other things, nonprofit things, on other days besides Sunday. So I understand that the parishioners are asking that they can go to these various places. But there are other things that happen that are nonprofit organizations that I feel need to be discussed also, different days of the week.
That's fine. All right, Councilman Goods, did you have your hand up? I know Vieira has his hand up.
I was just saying about the amendment, per charter, I think legal could have made that, bring that back. But Ms. Grimes did address it, so.
All right, Councilman Vieira.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, and again, I'm going to vote I want to vote to move this thing forward in one way or another, but we got to do it in a wise way. I think that, the extremely friendly amendment that Councilman Carlson talked about to sort of have it narrowly tailored not only promotes not discarding everything, but also it promotes, frankly, use of downtown in the idea that we want people to use downtown. This happens to be one of the things that people use downtown for on this particular day. Nobody else is downtown on Sunday morning except for parishioners and workaholic lawyers. So this is something that I think is narrowly tailored, gets to the consensus of what all of council wants. Again, I want to move this forward. Regardless of how it reasonably comes, but I think that's a wise way to go. It's not even a compromise. I think it's clearly getting to what we all want to do, quite frankly. Thank you.
Great.
If I can, Mr. Chairman, Martin
Yep,
Shelby
yep.
again. Just so that the clerk is clear and the record is clear and the intention of council is clear and legal understands what's expected, this seems to be an amendment or a friendly amendment, I suspect, unless it's a formal motion. But right now, is it the chair's, Mr. Maniscalco's intent to accept the discussion as
Yes, sir.
in terms
Yes,
of the
sir.
options?
Yes, sir.
Question for the clerk: are you clear on what the motion is with regard to the scope of it?
No, I was going to ask for chair to please clarify the motion. Thank you.
So if we could have staff come back February 4th to look at amending or even, we don't have to repeal the ordinance. I understand that we can do an amendment on it, and because we're looking at a narrowly tailored area, which is in parts of downtown, and we've had some discussion on ordinance 2020-122. So that comes back under staff reports.
On February 4th, by the way, and I believe Ms. Grimes indicated that they were able to do that, and I've
Yes.
confirmed with the deputy clerk that if council does make this motion today, it will appear on the agenda.
Very good. And that's the motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion that's been made by Councilman Maniscalco, seconded Mr. Dingfelder.
Question on the motion. Fantastic, Mr. Chairman. The only question I would have is, if it's under staff reports, is that adequate in terms of notice to the community as opposed to, usually we put it on, the first reading section as opposed to staff reports? Because if it's our intent to vote on it at first reading, I think it should be.
Mr. Shelby.
A good point, Councilman. My suggestion would be to place it under staff reports, but mark it as set for first reading consideration, so that council, at least it appears on the agenda, as such, you can move forward without any delay.
That's the intent of the motion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Carlson.
Mr. Beatty, also along those lines, we talk a lot about communication, and as we said, the emails and everything are going to keep flowing in, and they're angry at the mayor, they're mad at us, they're mad at you. It would help if the Public Works communication apparatus could. I know you don't agree exactly with the changes, but it would be great if you all could reach out to those groups that are organizing everybody to email us and just give them an update, and maybe let them know the options and what is coming up, so that whatever advocacy folks are going to do, it'll be informed and targeted. Thank you.
Sure thing. Thank you. Yes, we will reach out to, some of the folks that we've heard from, and others as well within the area. I do want to kind of restate that we may not need to repeal the current policy or, make any substantial changes. We may have, within the director's authority to make certain changes. So we'll take a look at it, and we'll certainly be in touch.
Councilman Dingfelder.
Goodness.
Okay, I've got a problem with that because directors come and go, staffs, administrations come and go. We need to change the ordinance, and that's what the motion says.
Yes, sir.
And it's not rescinding the ordinance, it's
No,
amending it.
amending. If we don't have to rescind it, we can
It's
tweak
fine.
it and change
Amending
it,
is
you know.
fine, But it's not a question of policy, and it's not a question of tweaking how we do this. It's a question of changing the ordinance. Thank you.
If I can be heard,
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Chairman, but I think what Mr. Bede raised might be what was addressed earlier, that if presently under this ordinance, the council, the director has that discretion today, that might expedite implementation if that's the agreement of the administration to work with city council. It might just hasten things in terms of relief that you're seeking. In the meantime, while you go forward with this process. Do you follow me?
That's not the intent of the motion.
No, it's not the intent, but I'm just bringing it to council's attention that's an option that's available presently as we speak. Is that correct, Mr. Bede? Am I misstating it?
Yes, sir, that's
I
correct.
understand it.
We got it.
Any further discussion?
No.
Thank you. There is a motion been made by Councilman Maniscalco, seconded by Councilman Carlson. Shall we do a roll call vote on this, Mr. Shelby?
The answer is, in this environment, yes, please.
Thank you very much. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Chairman,
Miranda?
Dingfelder has the second.
Wait. Councilman Dingfelder, yes, sir.
I had the second, actually.
That's it? We have a motion. Dingfelder had the second.
I thought Carlson did.
I don't,
No, I had Dingfelder had the second.
Then I will change it.
he's welcome. to-
We have a motion made by Councilman Maniscalco, seconded by Councilman Dingfelder. Roll call vote, please.
Miranda, Dingfelder, Vieira,
Yes.
Citro,
Dingfelder, yes.
Goods,
Yes.
Carlson,
Yes.
Maniscalco.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously with Councilmember Miranda being absent.
You have the gavel back, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Having said that, before we move forward, it's amazing how many emails we've gotten with this issue. But not a single email said, what about the homeless in downtown Tampa? What about people that are homeless that are digging through trash looking for something to eat? People that are outside these churches on the sidewalks that I see all the time. And I know people say or might think it's a government thing, but it's everybody's responsibility. And I hope that we can look at that issue as well, just as a community. That's my sarcastic comment.
That's reality.
Huh?
That's reality.
But it's true. I wish
reality.
people, there was an uproar about that. But having said that, we're going to move forward to the 5, 6, 7, and 8 items. I would like to get out of here by 12:30. I know the discussion ran longer than expected here. So we can get out of here by lunch because we have to come back at 5 o'clock. Item number 7 will come first, and then we'll go. Yeah, yes, sir?
Thank you, sir. Just for purposes of scheduling, because I had a lunch that's very, very flexible, but just so I can tell my individual, what time do you think we're going to break for lunch? Just so that
I don't think we're going to break for lunch. I want to complete the agenda by 12:30.
Okay, I'll tell them then 1. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Go ahead. Audit Department.
Good morning. This is Christine Glover, Director of the city's Internal Audit Department. I'm here to conduct a workshop on providing an overview of the Internal Audit Department and what we do. I have a PowerPoint. I see that that's up, but also I provided binders to City Council. I hope you all have those binders because I will be referring to them as part of the workshop. Okay, can I have the next slide? This is the agenda we're gonna use for this workshop. We're gonna, overview of the internal audit department, the organization and the standards that we follow, how we determine the audit development plan, how we determine what exactly we are going to audit, our process for conducting an audit, the audit reporting process. We'll look at some other responsibilities that we have, and also, some of the department performance. Next slide, please. So what I wanted you to see here, we are organized so that the director of the department, we report directly to the mayor, and that's for our independence. We do have a special relationship with the chief of staff, so you see a dotted line there. But I have 5 auditors that report to me, so there's 6 of us in the department. And what I want you to see is between the 6 of us, we have 10 certifications in the field of internal auditing and fraud. So we have a professional staff. In addition to that, we comply with the government auditing standards, and I have a noted on the block there. And what that standards does is it provides for ethics, independence, professional judgment, competency, and quality control and assurance. We do get audited. The department gets an external audit every 3 years from an external audit team, and the Association of Local Government Auditors put together for that. And this department has been to 7 peer reviews is what it's called over the last 20 plus years. If you do it every 3 years, we passed 7. And actually, we were due for a peer review in 2020, but that was postponed because of the pandemic. So this is a professional audit department, and each one of those peer reviews that we went through, it was determined that we were in compliance with the government audit standards. And that's important for us to know, because really the city of Tampa has a world-class internal audit department. We have other jurisdictions locally and nationally that actually copy what we do. Locally, in the Tampa Bay area, I know that St. Pete and Pasco County have certainly adopted some of the processes that we use. In our last peer review in 2017, we had an auditor from the city of Gainesville and from the city of Chattanooga, Tennessee. And both of those auditors noticed some things that we were excelling in and copied and took it back to their departments so that they could implement them as well. Okay, see the next slide. Thank you very much. Okay, so in your binders, and you can look under tab 2, you have a list. That's the audit universe that I referred to on the slide. There's over 160 items in that audit universe. And what that audit universe is the list of all the audits that we can do in the city. With the audit side staff that we have, it would take us 9 years to audit every item in the audit universe. So, of course, we don't approach it that way. We take a risk-based approach. And so that we can hit those areas that are maybe higher risk than others, maybe on a more frequent basis. So, what that risk-based approach is you'll see in the process flow that's there on the slide as well. So this is how we decide what we're going to audit. Is not arbitrary. It's also in your binders under tab 3. The way this process works is usually starting in May, I hold individual meetings with key management personnel across the city. That's over 30 meetings, directors and above. In that meeting with them, I take their portion of the audit universe, and actually in the one that's in your binder, I have it sorted by each one of the various groups. I take their portion of the audit universe with me, and we review that and make any updates if necessary. We talk about any concerns that they have, and this also gives them an opportunity to request any audits. And we do get that pretty frequently. I remember a few years back, I went out and did the risk assessment meetings, and I came back with 26 audits that management had requests. And in actuality, speaking of the audit universe, the reason we can do it takes us 9 years, is we can only do between 15 and 20 audits a year, given the audit staff, the size of the audit staff that we have. After I have all those meetings and documents, like I said, that typically starts in May. The next thing I do is I sit down with my staff, and we have a tool that we use, and so we do a risk assessment. And so it has factors, and I list those factors that we consider, and there's 7 factors there. The complexity of the activity, the physical impact, we look at the last audit results, laws, rules, and regulations governing that particular item on the audit universe, whether there's been an significant organizational change, the public welfare, and how long it's been since the last audit. We take every item on that audit universe and we rate it. The way it is structured, the higher the final score comes out, the greater the risk is for the city. And as I mentioned, in the audit universe that you have, it's sorted by the group, but we can also sort that by score, and that way it gives us those items that are highest risk at the top based on our risk assessment. From that, and we're usually doing that around the July timeframe. From that, I develop an audit plan for the upcoming fiscal year, which of course starts 1 October. And it's based on requests from management, the results of the risk assessment, and also ensuring we have coverage across the city. And one good example of that would be the first couple of years I was here at the city, we didn't do any audits in Parks and Rec or at the convention center. So we have to get around, have that coverage across the city. Once that plan is developed based on the resources we have, the number of audits we can do, I develop that audit plan, put it together, send it to the mayor, typically in August for review and approval. I've been with the city 7.5 years. I've been through that process 8 times. Every year, except one, the mayor has approved the audit plan that was presented. One year, mayor added something to, but never took anything away. And so once the audit agenda is approved by the mayor, that becomes our mode of operation for the upcoming year. And we publish that. It's published on the city website, as well as I send it back out to the key management personnel, and that gives them an opportunity to let us know if certain time of the year is too busy for them or really hectic, or would be better if we did the audit in a different time of year. And one example, I'll use that, like we audit the budget office. We wouldn't audit them during the key budget development cycle. So when we did audit the budget department, we audited them in the fall. Or a lot of times TPD does a lot of recertification type activity. There's a lot of outside demanding physical activity. They'll do that in February because maybe it's not as hot. So maybe we might not do an audit on TPD during that time period. It just allows us to manage the resources that we have. So that's the process that we go about developing the audit plan, decide what we're going to audit, and actually also in tab 3 in your binders, you can see the approved audit plan for fiscal year 2021, and that's what we are working on right now.
Yes, sir.
I hate to interrupt here, but I need to say this. Mr. Shelby brought something to my attention where he's correct. The EBO workshop was the first workshop put on for January, and we knew it would have needed some time. The workshop agenda got changed. I don't understand how that happened, because all of the workshop dealing with EBO and auditing should have been first on the agenda. Everything else has just come forth and got on the agenda and went first. Right now it's getting ready to go on 12. There's no way Mrs. Glover is going to be able to finish her presentation of the audit, first how it works, and also talk about the actual EBO audit, and also Ms. Grimes to deal with the actual ordinance of the audit, and then get to the EBO portion, which everyone is waiting for, and have been waiting for months now, to see what this consultant has done, what he has not done, and where we need to go forward. So for me, I would ask that, we look at looking at that time slot to break for lunch now at 12 and come back at 1, because I think there are a lot of questions. You had speakers here this morning, and to try to rush us all at 12:30, I think is unfair to the community and the constituents, and also I think for some of the members who really want to hear what's going on. So I would ask that we break for lunch at 12 and we come back at 1 if you like, sir, if you want an hour, however, but I think that we have to make sure we get everything in. This is very important. It's a critical issue of this community and of this body, because even though the administration may put forth things, if it's good, it's great for the administration. We don't get credit. At the end of the day, if it's bad, no matter what, we get hanged for it and nailed in the coffin for it. So I want to make sure that we don't get nailed in the coffin, that we're doing everything we can to make sure the staff, the consultant understands what we're looking for versus what they may have given in an upcoming presentation. So I would ask you to break for lunch at 12, sir.
All right, I'll give you that if we can come back at 1:15.
That's fine.
All right.
That's fine, sir.
But I don't want to hear any complaints that we're here too late tonight.
No, well, it is what it is. This is important.
Hey. So, all right, we'll break for lunch at 12 o'clock then, and we'll come back at 1:15. Is there any objection to that, Councilman Vieira? I know you had an item.
I have no objection. I mean, I'm fine staying until forever. The only thing what I would say regarding tonight and this evening is that, last week we dealt with hearings and quasi-judicial matters till 1:40 at night. I'm of the opinion that we've had hearings before that go to that late, and that's fine, but we just can't make the best decisions after 12:30, 1. You get tired. I know, without getting into specifics, there were some hearings, and I'm not saying I was, too darn tired, but a reasonable person could have been. So I would just say that when it comes to tonight, let's try to, deal with all the issues, but run through, because we have a lot of items on the agenda this evening, try to run through them in cutting out as much fat as we can, because if we're here at 12:30 and 1 and 1:30 dealing with quasi-judicials, that's a disservice to the public, because we're not going to be at our best. Just my opinion.
Okay. Thank you very much, and I agree with that. Councilman Carlson?
Yeah, if staff could please help us, we've tried to limit the number of cases that we have, and I know Councilman Goods in particular has been great about protecting that. But it's not just that it's unfair to us, it's unfair to the public. Members of the public every week complain to us because they have to stay till midnight or 1 or 2, and I think probably we should just have fewer cases on night meetings. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, if I may, please.
Yes, sir.
We can tell by the amount of citizens that come to speak on which ones are going to be more controversial. It might benefit not only the citizens but us that, judging by the amount of people that are here to speak for or against, would be the more controversial, and have those first so that the citizens can leave and that we can hear those first. Maybe while our minds are clear as to what Councilman Vieira said, but we can always gauge on which ones are going to be controversial by the amount of people that are here to speak for or against. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. All right. Ms. Glover, go ahead.
Okay. All right, so the next item is, can I have the slide, please? Okay, the one next after that one, that's the. All right, so the next thing I want to do is go over a little bit about how we go about conducting an audit, and this is going to lead into the reporting process, so it's kind of understand this as well. Once an audit from the audit agenda is assigned to an audit, we conduct interest conference with management, and then we conduct the planning phase. During the planning phase of that audit, we review policies and procedures, we interview personnel, and conduct walkthroughs in order to gain an understanding of the key processes, and we document those process flows similar to what you're seeing here in the PowerPoint presentation, but typically they're a lot more complex. We have management review those process flows and make sure it adequately represents the work their processes. We have done. We can do an analysis of the internal control system to ensure the internal control is adequate. And we also conduct a risk analysis to see what could go wrong in these processes, what controls are in place, and what's the remaining risk, and whether that risk is high, medium, or low. And then in the fieldwork phase of the audit, what we do is we're gonna test the controls that are in place to make sure they're working as designed. And what we do is we test those high-risk controls. If it's medium risk, we should test them, but if they're items of low risk, we typically will not do any testing in that part unless it's a significant function for the city. After we finish the field work phase and the testing, we go into the reporting and conduct the exit conferences necessary, okay? And then we distribute the report. And I don't want to go into too much information right there because that's going to be actually on the next slide.
Do you want to stop there and we can start back up after lunch, or will this throw everything off?
No, that'd be fine. We can pick up with the reporting process. I think this is a part of the workshop that council is interested in, and so we need to take our time and go through it. So this would be a good.
So we're going to break for lunch. We're going to pick up here, and we'll be back at 1:15. We are in recess. Who's gonna go?